Chicago had stopped bleeding 3 days ago. The bodies were still coming out. Mark Grayson hovered 200 feet above what used to be the merchandise mart. The building leaned now, its north wall gone exposing offices like a dissected specimen. Rescue crews moved through the rubble with the practiced efficiency of people who had done this too many times in the past week. They did not look up anymore. Heroes flying overhead had stopped meaning safety. The Invincible War. That was what the news networks were calling it. 16 versions of himself pulled from other realities by Angstrom Levy's portal technology. 16 marks, most of them twisted into something he could barely recognize. They had torn through the city like a natural disaster with conscious intent. The fight had lasted 9 hours. The cleanup would take months. The funerals were still being scheduled. Mark descended slowly, touching down beside a fire truck. A paramedic glanced at him, face blank with exhaustion, then returned to her work. No gratitude. No recognition. Just the hollow efficiency of someone processing trauma one body at a time. Cecil Stedman's voice crackled through the earpiece Mark had been given after the 4th building collapse. Invincible. GDA sensors are picking up spatial anomalies 3 blocks east of your position. Could be residual portal energy. Mark lifted off without responding. 3 blocks east put him near what used to be a residential district. Used to be. The grammar of disaster was always past tense. The anomaly was not hard to find. Reality had a texture when it was breaking. The air shimmered like heat rising from summer asphalt, but the temperature was dropping. Mark's breath misted as he approached. Small objects, debris, pieces of rebar. Someone's abandoned shoe floated in lazy orbits around a point roughly 6 feet off the ground. Cecil, I'm seeing it. Looks like the portals Angstrom was using, but smaller. More stable, maybe. Don't get close. We're dispatching a containment team. Mark ignored the instruction. He had spent the last 72 hours pulling people from wreckage while Cecil's containment teams filled out paperwork. He drifted closer, one hand extended. The rift pulsed. Mark had a half-second to register the change, the shimmer intensifying, the floating debris suddenly accelerating outward before the sky tore open. Not a portal. A wound. The sound came first, a bass rumble that Mark felt in his chest more than heard. Then light, harsh, and white spilling through a gash in reality roughly 20 feet across. And then they came through. 2 figures. The first hit the ground with enough force to crater the street. Asphalt buckled and shattered, sending chunks of pavement spinning through nearby storefronts. The figure stood slowly, cape settling around shoulders that seemed carved from something harder than flesh. Mark knew the colors, red and blue, the symbol on the chest. Everyone knew Superman. But this version wore darkness like armor. The suit was predominantly black-red accents, stark against the void dark fabric. The S shield looked less like hope and more like a brand. The second figure landed with more grace, but no less presence. Wonder Woman. Her armor caught the afternoon light red and gold, but there was nothing bright about her. She scanned the area with the cold assessment of a general evaluating a battlefield. Mark dropped to street level, fists clenched. Behind him, he heard sirens, rescue workers shouting. The sounds of people who had learned to run at the first sign of power cutting loose. Superman's eyes found him immediately. There was no warmth in that gaze, no recognition of kinship between people who could fly. Just evaluation. Where are we? Superman's voice carried easily across the destroyed street, not loud. He did not need volume to command attention. Chicago. Mark kept his voice level. You came through some kind of portal. We've been dealing with dimensional incursions all week, so if you're here too, I didn't ask about your problems. Superman took a step forward. A single step, but it carried weight. I asked where we are. What Earth is this? Wonder Woman moved to Superman's right hand, resting on the sword at her hip. Not threatening, not yet, but ready. Mark felt his own hands ball tighter. You're on Earth, my Earth. And right now it's recovering from a war that nearly leveled half a dozen cities. So whatever you're doing here, whatever brought you through that rift, I need you to. The ground shook. Not from Superman, from something approaching fast. Mark's enhanced hearing picked it up first, the whine of GDA transport engines, the hydraulic hiss of deployment systems. Cecil's containment team was arriving, and they were not coming light. 3 armored vehicles screamed around the corner, their turrets already tracking the 2 newcomers. Reanimin, the GDA's solution to the superhuman problem, poured from the rear hatches. Dozens of them, their reanimated bodies augmented with military hardware, moving with the jerky precision of corpses given purpose. Superman's eyes flickered red, just for a moment, just long enough for Mark to see the heat building there. Stand down, Mark said, pushing himself between the GDA forces and the 2 arrivals. Everyone just... A voice cut through the tension, calm and measured. Invincible, step aside. Cecil Stedman emerged from the lead vehicle. No armor, no visible weapons. Just a man in a suit with an earpiece and the absolute confidence of someone who had planned for this exact scenario. I'm Director Stedman, Global Defense Agency. You 2 just triggered every alarm we have within a 50-mile radius. I'm going to need you to come with us for processing. Superman did not move. Processing. Evaluation, identification, standard protocol for unauthorized interdimensional travel. Cecil's voice remained level. We're not your enemy. But right now, you're an unknown factor in a city that's already buried 1,000 of its people this week. So you're going to need to cooperate. Wonder Woman's sword cleared its sheath an inch. We don't answer to bureaucrats. No, Cecil smiled. It did not reach his eyes. You answer to reality. And the reality is, you're strangers in a place that's learned the hard way what happens when people with power stop caring about consequences. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to come with us. We're going to figure out where you're from and how to send you back, and nobody else is going to die today. He paused. Unless you'd prefer to test whether your invulnerability extends to teleportation into the upper atmosphere. Mark felt the air change. Not physically. Something subtler. Superman and Wonder Woman exchanged a glance, some wordless communication passing between them. Then Superman spoke, and Mark heard something in his voice that made his stomach tighten. You think you're protecting them? Superman gestured at the city around them, at the rubble and the rescue workers and the ordinary people trying to survive another day that should not have been this hard. You think your protocols and your contingencies will keep them safe? He took another step forward. The Reanimin raised their weapons. Cecil's hand moved to his earpiece. I used to think that too, Superman continued. I tried your way. Rules and oversight and asking permission to do what needed to be done. Do you know what it got me, Metropolis in ruins? Millions dead. The woman I loved murdered by a madman who should have been stopped years before. His eyes burned red just for a second before fading back to blue. I won't make that mistake again. Mark moved without thinking. He put himself directly in front of Superman, close enough to see the absolute certainty in those eyes. Then you're in the wrong place, Mark said quietly. Because we just finished fighting 16 versions of me. Most of them thought they knew better than everyone else too. They thought power meant they got to decide. and they're all dead now. Superman looked at him. Really looked at him. Mark saw something flicker across that face, not doubt, but calculation. Assessment. The way a general might look at terrain before choosing where to make a stand. Then Superman's gaze moved past Mark to the crater his landing had made, to the broken storefronts, to the rescue workers who had stopped their grim work to watch this new threat. He studied them the way someone might study a problem that needed solving. "This world?" Superman said, almost to himself. Then he looked back at Cecil. "Show me your facility." Not surrender. Permission. The difference was subtle but absolute. Wonder Woman's hand left her sword, but her posture remained coiled. Ready. She did not look at Mark. He was not worth her attention yet. Cecil gestured toward the vehicles. "Transport will take you to our facility. We'll talk there." As the group moved toward the transports, Mark stayed hovering above the street. He watched Superman walk past the crater his landing had made, past the broken storefronts and scattered debris. The man did not look at the damage, did not acknowledge it. He looked ahead, already planning. Mark had seen that before. That kind of focus. The certainty that came with too much power and too much pain and too much time spent being right. His earpiece crackled. "Good work." Cecil set his voice for Mark alone now. "But don't think for a second that just solved anything." Mark looked at the rift, still pulsing weakly in the air behind them. It had not closed. If anything, it looked more stable than before. Something about its frequency felt wrong, like a note played slightly off-key. The kind of wrong that made his Viltrumite biology itch. "I know," he said. The rescue workers returned to their grim task. The bodies kept coming out. Chicago had stopped bleeding 3 days ago, but the wounds were still fresh. Mark descended toward the cleanup crews. There was work to do. There was always work to do. Behind him, the rift pulsed once more, then settled into a low hum. Waiting. Far above the planet, beyond the atmosphere, where Earth's blue gave way to the black of space, something registered the disturbance. Not immediately, not with alarm, but with the patient attention of a predator noting movement in tall grass. The rift's signature was faint, barely distinguishable from cosmic background radiation, but it was there. A crack in reality, a door left ajar, and in the cold calculation of a species that had conquered 1,000 worlds, doors like that were always interesting. The frequency was wrong. That was what would be reported. Not dangerous yet. Not a threat. Just wrong in a way that suggested potential. The kind of potential that warranted observation. For now, that was enough. Mark did not know about the Watchers in the dark. He only knew about the bodies that still needed to be pulled from the rubble, the families that still needed notification, the funerals that still needed to be planned. He knew about the rift that refused to close and the 2 strangers who looked at his world like it was something that needed fixing. He knew that Chicago had stopped bleeding 3 days ago, but everyone was still waiting for the next wound to open. The GDA facility didn't look like much from the outside. That was intentional. Cecil Stedman had learned a long time ago that the most dangerous places in the world rarely advertised. Superman sat in the interrogation room, though Cecil preferred to call it a consultation suite, with the stillness of a statue. He hadn't moved in 20 minutes, hadn't asked for water, hadn't tested the walls or scanned for exits. He simply sat, hands folded on the metal table, and waited. Wonder Woman stood behind him, refusing the offered chair. Her eyes tracked every corner of the room, cataloging angles and vulnerabilities with the methodical patience of someone who had fought in actual wars. Cecil watched them through the one-way mirror a tablet in his hands, displaying readings that made his head of xenobiology nervous. Energy signatures that didn't match anything in their database. Cellular density that suggested these two could survive things that would atomize most of Earth's hero population. "Earpiece active?" Cecil asked. The technician beside him nodded. "Embedded in the collar. Undetectable unless they're specifically looking for it. Frequencies keyed to the disruption pulse. And if they are looking for it, then we find out if teleportation works on Kryptonians." Cecil didn't smile. He'd stopped finding his own contingencies amusing years ago. Somewhere around the third time he'd had to authorize lethal force against someone wearing a cape. He picked up a second tablet and walked into the room. Superman's eyes tracked him immediately. Not hostile, just aware. The kind of awareness that came from being the most dangerous thing in any given space for so long that threat assessment had become autonomic. "Director Stedman." Superman's voice was level, almost pleasant. "I assume you have questions." Cecil set the tablet on the table between them. "I have a lot of questions. Let's start with the simple one. What's your Earth's designation? Every reality we've encountered has a signature, a vibrational frequency that distinguishes it from parallel dimensions." Cecil pulled up a display showing the multiverse mapping they'd developed after Angstrom-Levy's attack. Hundreds of realities color-coded by threat level. Most of them were red. You came through a rift that's still active. That means your home dimension is anchored to ours somehow. I need to know which one. Superman glanced at the display. If he was impressed by the scope of the multiverse, he didn't show it. "And if I don't tell you, then you stay here until I figure it out anyway." "No." Superman's voice didn't rise, didn't harden, just stated a fact. "I won't." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Wonder Woman shifted her stance, hand near her weapon. Cecil felt his pulse quicken, but kept his expression neutral. "You think you're protecting them." Superman gestured at the city beyond, at the rubble, and the rescue workers, and the ordinary people trying to survive another impossible day. "You think your protocols and your contingencies will keep them safe." He stood slowly, deliberately. The motion carried no threat, but Cecil's hand moved to his earpiece anyway. "I used to think that too," Superman continued. "I tried your way, rules and oversight, and asking permission to do what needed to be done. Do you know what it got me? Metropolis in ruins? Millions dead. The woman I loved, murdered by a madman who should have been stopped years before." His eyes flickered red for just a second, before fading back to blue. "I won't make that mistake again. Not here, not anywhere." Cecil met his gaze. "You're not on your Earth anymore. Here you don't get to decide what mistakes we're allowed to make." Superman tilted his head slightly, and Cecil recognized the look. Not anger, not even disagreement. Just the patient expression of someone watching a child insist the sky was green. "Yes," Superman said quietly. "I do." Cecil's hand tightened on his tablet. He'd stared down Omni-Man in this exact building, had authorized strikes against beings that could level mountains. But this was different. Omni-Man had been cruel, dismissive. Superman was neither of those things. He was just absolutely certain. And that was worse. "We have 43 people 3 blocks from here who are about to die," Cecil said, changing tactics. "Armed group, unknown affiliation. My people aren't equipped to handle them without casualties." He pulled up the tactical feed. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to help me save them. Not because I'm asking. Not because you're cooperating, but because that's what you do. Cecil looked up. And I'm going to watch how you do it. That's what I do. Superman studied him for a moment, then nodded. Show me. They rode in silence. The GDA transport cut through streets, still marked by the Invincible war barricades, memorial flowers buildings, propped up by emergency scaffolding. Mark had joined them, summoned by Cecil with a terseness that suggested this wasn't a request. Armed militants, Mark asked. Unknown affiliation. But they're carrying hardware that shouldn't be on the civilian market. Cecil pulled up a tactical display. Looks like they're targeting a specific building. Residential. 43 people inside, according to city records. Hostage situation. Too organized. This is a hit. The transport stopped 2 blocks out. Cecil gestured to the door. We've got sniper positions here and here. Assault teams staged at the north entrance. But if they've got the kind of firepower our sensors suggest, my people won't last long enough to evacuate civilians. He looked at Superman, not asking, just stating facts. Superman stepped out of the transport without hesitation. Wonder Woman followed her hand, already on her sword. Mark floated up, scanning the area with enhanced vision. 12 targets confirmed, Mark said. No, wait. 14. 2 on the roof. They've got... The building exploded. Not the whole structure. Just the 3rd floor, a shaped charge that blew out in a controlled pattern designed to collapse the floors above while leaving the lower levels intact. Whoever these people were, they knew demolition. Superman moved. He didn't fly so much as accelerate, covering the distance in a heartbeat. Mark saw him catch a falling section of wall that must have weighed 3 tons, redirecting its momentum away from the street. Then he was inside, moving faster than Mark could track. The gunfire started immediately. Mark dove toward the building, but Wonder Woman was already there, her sword deflecting rounds that should have torn through concrete. She moved like water, every motion economical and brutal. A militant swung a rifle toward her. She stepped inside, his guard drove her elbow into his sternum, and he dropped. Mark grabbed 2 civilians scrambling from the lower floors, lifting them clear of the destruction. Behind him, he heard more gunfire. Then silence. Superman emerged from the smoke carrying 3 unconscious militants. He set them down, not drop test set, then turned back toward the building. Top floor. 5 more, he said to Wonder Woman. She nodded and moved. Mark pulled another civilian from a 2nd-story window. The woman was crying, clutching a child. He got them to the ground, just as part of the wall buckled. Superman caught it with one hand, held it steady, while Mark cleared the area beneath. The entire engagement lasted 90 seconds. When it was over, Cecil walked through the aftermath. 14 militants unconscious and restrained. 41 civilians evacuated. 2 dead. An elderly man on the 4th floor killed by the initial explosion before Superman could reach him. And a woman who'd been caught in the collapse of an interior wall that Superman had been holding up the exterior to prevent. Cecil looked at the body bags being loaded into the ambulances. Then at Superman, who stood amid the wreckage without a scratch on him, not even breathing hard. Efficient, Cecil said. I saved 41. Superman's voice carried no satisfaction, no triumph, no regret. Just the flat statement of someone who'd done this calculation too many times to feel anything about it anymore. 2 were already beyond saving when the charge went off. You're sure about that? Superman met his eyes. I'm always sure, Director. That's the point. Mark landed beside them, face tight. He'd been the one to find the woman's body. He'd seen the wall Superman had been holding the structural damage that had cascaded inward while Superman prioritized the exterior. "You let her die," Mark said quietly. "I saved 41. Superman repeated. Not defensive, not apologetic, not just factual. "If I'd gone for her first, the entire western wall would have collapsed. 16 people were behind that wall. I made the choice that saved the most lives." "You don't get to make that choice." Superman turned to face him fully now. "Someone has to, and I've been making it long enough to know I'm better at it than most." Cecil watched the exchange carefully. This was what he'd needed to see. Not Superman saving people. Superman deciding who to save. "Get back in the transport," Cecil said. They rode back in silence. Mark stared out the window. Superman sat perfectly still. Wonder Woman's expression never changed. Cecil made notes on his tablet, frame times, decision trees. The exact moment Superman had prioritized structural integrity over individual rescue. Professional. Controlled. Perfect. Too perfect. That night alone in his office, Cecil reviewed the footage again. Superman catching the wall. The precise application of force. The way he'd moved through the building without causing additional structural damage while simultaneously calculating which lives had the highest probability of survival. He'd seen this before. Omni-Man's initial reports back when they'd thought he was their greatest asset. The same precision. The same control. The same absolute certainty that he knew best. Cecil pulled up the audio file from the earpiece embedded in Superman's collar. "He'll try to control us," Wonder Woman's voice said. "He already is." Superman's reply was calm, almost amused. "That's why we let him think it's working. And when he realizes it isn't, then we'll remind him that control is an illusion that only works on people who accept it." Cecil stopped the playback. Superman knew, had known from the beginning. The earpiece, the monitoring, the entire pretense of cooperation Superman was allowing it. Not because he respected Cecil's authority, because he understood that appearing to cooperate served his purposes. Cecil opened a new file and began typing. Contingency protocols, Kryptonian physiology hypotheticals, teleportation coordinates for the upper atmosphere, energy disruption frequencies, temporal displacement scenarios, 17 different ways to remove Superman from the board if necessary. He knew they probably wouldn't work. Superman had survived Metropolis, had overthrown governments, had become the thing he'd spent years fighting against and made peace with it. But Cecil wrote them anyway, because that's what he did. He planned for the worst and hoped he'd never need to implement it while knowing that hope had never saved anyone from anything that mattered. The lights in his office flickered as power rerouted to weapon systems 3 floors down. Automated defenses coming online, just in case. By morning, he'd have 23 contingencies. By noon, he'd have to decide which ones to test, because Superman was right about one thing. Someone had to make the choice. Cecil just wasn't sure anyone should be that certain they'd chosen correctly. He pulled up Mark's file next, made a note to schedule a meeting. Tomorrow. Priority 1. Because the worst thing about Superman wasn't that he was wrong. It was that Cecil couldn't prove he wasn't right. And that terrified him more than any amount of raw power ever could. Batman arrived at 3 in the morning, which was the only time Cecil Stedman got anything resembling sleep. The alarm didn't wake him because he'd been awake reviewing footage of Superman's deployment for the 7th time. He pressed the intercom without looking up from his screen. "Let him through." The surveillance tech on duty sounded uncertain. "Sir, he bypassed 6 security checkpoints." We don't know how he got into the building. I do. Cecil closed the file. He walked through the front door, and you didn't see him do it. 2 minutes later, Batman stood in Cecil's office. No introduction, no explanation for how he'd infiltrated one of the most secure facilities on the planet. He simply emerged from the shadows near the bookshelf like he'd been there the entire time. Director Stedman. Cecil gestured to the chair across from his desk. Batman ignored it, moving instead to the window overlooking the city. The gesture wasn't casual. He was checking sight lines, exit routes, tactical vulnerabilities. Even standing still, he was working. You came through the secondary rift, Cecil said. It wasn't a question. 40 minutes ago, whatever pulled Superman through destabilized further. I felt the pull and made a choice. Batman turned from the window. Where is he? Temporary quarters, East Wing, under surveillance. Not enough. I know. Cecil pulled up a new display. Which is why you're here. You're Bruce Wayne, the Batman. From a reality where Superman became a dictator and you led the resistance against him. Batman's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture. Confirmation. How much do you know about injustice? He asked. Only what I've extrapolated from Superman's behavior and your arrival. You wouldn't have followed him through that rift unless you believed he was a threat. Cecil leaned back in his chair. The question is whether you're here to stop him or to make sure I can. Both. Then we have a problem. Because I've already run every scenario I can think of, and most of them end with significant casualties. Yours included. Batman moved to the desk, examining the contingency protocols Cecil had been developing. His eyes tracked across the data with the speed of someone who'd done this calculus hundreds of times before. Kryptonite, he said finally, doesn't exist in this reality. We've scanned every mineral database, every geological survey. Whatever makes Superman vulnerable in your world isn't present in ours. Magic. Limited practitioners. None powerful enough to reliably contain someone at Superman's level. Red solar radiation. Cecil pulled up another file. Theoretical. We'd need time to build the infrastructure. Time we may not have. Batman's jaw tightened. He continued scanning the protocols, and Cecil watched him process the same brutal arithmetic that had been keeping Cecil awake for the past 36 hours. Every solution required resources they didn't have. Every contingency assumed they could get close enough to implement it before Superman decided to stop cooperating. You're thinking about this wrong, Batman said finally. Enlighten me. You're planning to fight him. You should be planning to make him want to leave. Cecil considered that. He won't leave while that rift is open. It's his only way home. Then we close it. With what we barely understand the physics. Our best xenophysicists are still analyzing the energy signature. Cecil pulled up the rift data. And even if we could close it, Superman would see that as hostile action. He'd stop us. Not if he thinks it's the only way to protect this world. Batman leaned forward slightly. Superman's weakness isn't physical. It's ideological. He believes he's right. He believes that order, even forced order, is better than chaos. You want to get rid of him. Make him think that his presence here causes more chaos than it prevents. Cecil felt something click into place. Not a solution, but the shape of one. You want me to manufacture a crisis. I want you to show him that he doesn't understand this world well enough to fix it. That his methods don't work here. Batman straightened. In our reality, Superman took control because he knew the players, knew the systems, could predict the consequences. Here he's operating blind. Use that. And if he adapts, if he decides to stay and learn, then you'll need a backup plan. Batman's expression hardened. And I'll help you build it. They worked through the night. Batman sketched out Superman's behavioral patterns, the warning signs that had preceded regime takeover in his reality. Cecil cross-referenced them with the surveillance data from the past 2 days. The correlations were terrifying. Here, Batman pointed to footage from the militant response. He calculated survival probability before engaging. See how he positions himself. That's not instinct. That's someone who's done triage math enough times to make it automatic. Cecil rewound the footage. Batman was right. Superman hadn't charged in like a traditional hero. He'd assessed, calculated, then acted with the efficiency of someone who'd long ago accepted that not everyone could be saved. He's already thinking like a ruler, Cecil said quietly. He's been thinking like one for years. The question is whether he's decided your world needs ruling. Batman pulled up another file. What about your other heroes? The ones who survived the Invincible War? Scattered, traumatized. Most of them are still processing what happened. And Invincible Mark Grayson. Cecil hesitated. Mark is complicated. He's powerful. Probably powerful enough to fight Superman to a standstill. But he's also young, still believes in heroes. Does Superman know that? I think he's counting on it. Batman nodded, slowly processing. Then we need to break that assumption. Superman sees Mark as a younger version of himself. Someone who can be guided toward the right choices. We make Mark the variable Superman can't predict. Mark won't help us manipulate Superman. He doesn't have to know that's what he's doing. Batman moved to the window again, looking out at the city. In my world, Superman's greatest weakness was his certainty. He was so sure he was right that he stopped checking whether he was wrong. If we can make him question his understanding of this world, make him hesitate, he becomes manageable. He becomes human. The words hung in the air like a threat and a promise. Cecil pulled up a new file. There's something else you should know. Mark's father, Omni-Man. He was a Viltrumite, an alien conqueror posing as Earth's greatest hero. He revealed his true nature, tried to force Mark to join him in subjugating humanity. They fought. Omni-Man eventually left, but the damage was done. Batman's expression didn't change, but Cecil saw the recognition in his eyes. The parallels. Mark sees Superman and sees his father, Cecil continued. That's the real problem. Not whether Superman is a threat, but whether Mark can bring himself to treat him like one. Can he? I'll find out tomorrow morning. A proximity alarm chimed softly. Cecil glanced at his monitor and felt his stomach tighten. He's moving, Cecil said. Superman just left his quarters. Batman was already at the door. Where? Roof access. He's going outside. They found Mark there first, hovering 50 feet above the facility. Cecil had installed motion sensors that tracked superhuman movement patterns. Mark triggered them whenever he patrolled, which was every night since the Invincible War ended. The kid didn't sleep much anymore. Superman rose from the roof slowly, cape catching the wind. He didn't acknowledge Mark immediately, just floated there looking at the city sprawled beneath them. At the scars the dimensional travelers had left behind. Cecil and Batman watched from the roof access stairwell, staying in the shadows, close enough to hear, far enough to give the illusion of privacy. You patrol every night, Superman said finally. Mark didn't look at him. Someone has to protect them or to punish yourself. What do you want? Superman drifted closer, not threatening, just closing distance. That woman today, the one who died. You think I should have saved her? You could have. At the cost of 16 others, I made the choice that mattered. Mark's fists clenched. They're not numbers. Everyone's a number when you're deciding who lives. Superman's voice remained level. You've already done this math. During your war. You just haven't admitted it yet. The words landed like a physical blow. Mark spun toward Superman, anger flashing across his face. Don't, Mark said quietly. Don't compare yourself to what I had to do. Why not? You made the same choice I did. Saved who you could. Let the rest die. The only difference is, I don't pretend it was anything other than what it was. My father said things like that. Superman studied him for a moment. Your father wanted conquest. I want order. Those aren't the same thing. They look the same from where I'm standing. Then you're not looking closely enough. Superman turned back toward the city. Your director has been monitoring me since I arrived, developing contingencies. Batman is probably in this building right now, planning the same thing. He looked directly at the stairwell where Cecil and Batman were hidden. Everyone's afraid of what I might do if I decide their way isn't working. He turned back to Mark. That fear is justified. I've seen what happens when good people insist on half measures while the world burns. I won't let it happen again. Superman descended back to the roof, walking past the stairwell without acknowledging Cecil and Batman's presence. The message was clear. He knew they were there, had known the entire time, and didn't care. Mark hovered in the air for a long moment after Superman left, silhouetted against the city lights. Then he landed on the roof and sat down, head in his hands. Cecil emerged from the stairwell. Batman stayed hidden. He's not wrong, Mark said quietly. About what? About the choices. About having to decide who lives and dies. Mark looked up, and Cecil saw exhaustion there. Not physical. Something deeper. During the Invincible War, there was a moment where 3 different versions of me were killing people in 3 different locations. I could only stop one. Had to choose which 2 got to keep killing while I handled the 3rd. What did you do? I picked the location with the most people, saved 200 civilians, and let 30 die somewhere else. Mark's voice cracked slightly. Superman's math. And I hated myself for it. Still do. Cecil sat down beside him. Didn't offer comfort. Just presence. The difference, Cecil said finally, is that you hate yourself for it. Superman doesn't. He's made peace with that math, maybe even embraced it. And that's what makes him dangerous. Or effective. Both. That's the problem. Mark was quiet for a moment. Then, what if he's right? What if the only way to actually save people is to stop asking permission, to stop worrying about the lines we're not supposed to cross? Then we become him. We become your father. We become every dictator in history who convinced themselves that the end justified the means. Cecil stood. But more importantly, we lose the thing that makes us worth saving in the first place. The right to make our own mistakes. Even if people die because of them. Especially then. Because the alternative is someone like Superman deciding our mistakes for us. And I've spent the last 2 years cleaning up after someone who thought he knew better than everyone else. Cecil looked at the city. I'd rather die free than live under someone else's idea of perfection. Mark looked at the scars and the rebuilding, and the stubborn, stupid resilience of people who refuse to be conquered, even by gods. He's going to do something, Mark said. Superman. He's not just going to sit there and wait for us to send him home. He's going to see something he thinks he can fix, and he's going to fix it. Whether we want him to or not. I know. And when he does, we're going to have to stop him. We'll build a plan. Can we? Cecil didn't answer immediately. Couldn't. Because the honest answer was that he didn't know. Superman was stronger than Mark, more experienced than Adam Eve, more durable than the immortal. And he had the absolute certainty of someone who'd already watched the world burn once and decided he'd never let it happen again. We'll buy time, Cecil said finally. That's what we do. Batman emerged from the shadows after Mark left. He's vulnerable, Batman said. Mark, Superman. He needs Mark to validate him. Needs someone with similar power to agree that he's making the right choices. That's his blind spot. He's so focused on converting Mark to his perspective that he's not seeing the larger picture. Cecil considered that. You want to use Mark as bait. I want to use Mark as a mirror. Show Superman what he actually looks like when someone with his values refuses to compromise them. Batman moved to the roof edge, looking at the city the same way Superman and Mark had. In my world, Superman fell because he stopped listening to people who disagreed with him, surrounded himself with those who'd already made the same choices he had. If we can keep Mark from becoming that person, we keep Superman isolated. We keep Superman uncertain. And uncertainty is the only weapon we have that might work without getting people killed. Cecil's earpiece crackled. Director, we've got activity at the Rift site. Energy signature is spiking. Cecil and Batman exchanged a look. How fast? Cecil asked. Fast. If this continues, we could be looking at another breach. Maybe bigger than the one that brought Superman through. Cecil was already moving toward the stairs. Batman matched his pace. If something else comes through, Batman said, Superman will respond. He'll see it as an opportunity to prove himself, to show you his way works. Then, we control the narrative before he gets the chance. Cecil activated his comms. Mobilize containment teams. Full deployment. And get me Adam Eve. If that rift opens wider, we're going to need someone who can manipulate it at the molecular level. They reached the operations center to find controlled chaos. Technicians scrambling to stabilize monitoring equipment. Energy readings fluctuating wildly. And on the main screen, the rift pulsing with a rhythm that looked almost organic, almost alive. Estimates on breach time, Cecil demanded. Unknown. Could be minutes, could be hours. The pattern doesn't match anything from the Invincible War. Batman moved to the screen, studying the energy signature with the focus of someone parsing code. It's not random. There's structure here, not alive designed. Something on the other side is testing the rift, probing for weaknesses. Testing for what? Load capacity, dimensional stability. Someone's trying to force it open wider. Batman traced a pattern on the screen. And based on this progression, they're succeeding. Cecil felt ice in his stomach. The Invincible War had nearly destroyed them, and that was just alternate versions of Mark. If something bigger came through something like the entities Batman had described from his world, Get Superman, Cecil said. His deputy looked shocked. Sir, you heard me. Wake him up, brief him, and tell him we need his assessment. Cecil turned to Batman. You were right. He needs to see this world doesn't want his brand of order. But first, we need to make sure there's a world left to reject him. Batman nodded slowly. Calculated risk. The only kind I take. 20 minutes later, Superman stood in the operations center looking at the rift data with an expression Cecil couldn't quite read. Wonder Woman flanked him, hand near her sword. Mark had arrived moments after, still wearing the exhaustion of someone who'd been having a very long night. Most of the technicians had frozen at Superman's entrance. Some of them had only heard the stories. Now, they were seeing the reality, a man who moved through their highest security facility like he owned it, because on some level he did. Energy signature overlaps with anomalies we logged from Omni-Man. One of the senior analysts reported, voice tight. Not a perfect match, but close enough to make me nervous. Mark's head snapped up. What? Something with similar cellular density. Same kind of bioelectric profile. Cecil pulled up the comparison data. Could be Viltrumite. Could be something that registers the same way. We don't know. Superman studied the screen. How long until breach? At current rate of destabilization, 90 minutes, maybe less. Then we close it. We can't, Cecil said, not without understanding the physics. If we force it closed with that much energy pushing from the other side, we could trigger a larger cascade. Pull through everything within a mile radius of the breach point. Then we contain whatever comes through. You mean you contain it, Mark said. He didn't sound grateful, just resigned. Superman looked at him. If something comes through that rift powerful enough to destabilize dimensional barriers, the list of candidates narrows considerably. And none of them are good. You don't know that. I know breaches don't happen by accident. And if he adapts, if he decides to stay and learn, then you'll need a backup plan. Batman's expression hardened. And I'll help you build it. They worked through the night. Batman sketched out Superman's behavioral patterns, the warning signs that had preceded regime takeover in his reality. Cecil cross-referenced them with the surveillance data from the past 2 days. The correlations were terrifying. Here, Batman pointed to footage from the militant response. He calculated survival probability before engaging. See how he positions himself. That's not instinct. That's someone who's done triage math enough times to make it automatic. Cecil rewound the footage. Batman was right. Superman hadn't charged in like a traditional hero. He'd assessed, calculated, then acted with the efficiency of someone who'd long ago accepted that not everyone could be saved. He's already thinking like a ruler, Cecil said quietly. He's been thinking like one for years. The question is whether he's decided your world needs ruling. Batman pulled up another file. What about your other heroes, the ones who survived the Invincible War? Scattered, traumatized. Most of them are still processing what happened. And Invincible Mark Grayson, Cecil hesitated. Mark is complicated. He's powerful. Probably powerful enough to fight Superman to a standstill. But he's also young. Still believes in heroes. Does Superman know that? I think he's counting on it. Batman nodded, slowly processing. Then we need to break that assumption. Superman sees Mark as a younger version of himself. Someone who can be guided toward the right choices. We make Mark the variable Superman can't predict. Mark won't help us manipulate Superman. He doesn't have to know that's what he's doing. Batman moved to the window again, looking out at the city. In my world, Superman's greatest weakness was his certainty. He was so sure he was right that he stopped checking whether he was wrong. If we can make him question his understanding of this world, make him hesitate, he becomes manageable. He becomes human. The words hung in the air like a threat and a promise. Cecil pulled up a new file. There's something else you should know. Mark's father, Omni-Man. He was a Viltrumite, an alien conqueror posing as Earth's greatest hero. He revealed his true nature, tried to force Mark to join him in subjugating humanity. They fought. Omni-Man eventually left, but the damage was done. Batman's expression didn't change, but Cecil saw the recognition in his eyes. The parallels. Mark sees Superman and sees his father, Cecil continued. That's the real problem. Not whether Superman is a threat, but whether Mark can bring himself to treat him like one. Can he? I'll find out tomorrow morning. A proximity alarm chimed softly. Cecil glanced at his monitor and felt his stomach tighten. He's moving, Cecil said. Superman just left his quarters. Batman was already at the door. Where? Roof access. He's going outside. They found Mark there first, hovering 50 feet above the facility. Cecil had installed motion sensors that tracked superhuman movement patterns. Mark triggered them whenever he patrolled, which was every night since the Invincible War ended. The kid didn't sleep much anymore. Superman rose from the roof slowly, cape catching the wind. He didn't acknowledge Mark immediately, just floated there, looking at the city sprawled beneath them. At the scars the dimensional travelers had left behind. Cecil and Batman watched from the roof access stairwell, staying in the shadows. Close enough to hear, far enough to give the illusion of privacy. You patrol every night, Superman said finally. Mark didn't look at him. Someone has to protect them or to punish yourself. What do you want? Superman drifted closer, not threatening, just closing distance. That woman today, the one who died. You think I should have saved her? You could have, at the cost of 16 others. I made the choice that mattered. Mark's fists clenched. They're not numbers. Everyone's a number when you're deciding who lives. Superman's voice remained level. You've already done this math. During your war. You just haven't admitted it yet. The words landed like a physical blow. Mark spun toward Superman, anger flashing across his face. Don't, Mark said quietly. Don't compare yourself to what I had to do. Why not? You made the same choice I did. Saved who you could. Let the rest die. The only difference is, I don't pretend it was anything other than what it was. My father said things like that. Superman studied him for a moment. Your father wanted conquest. I want order. Those aren't the same thing. They look the same from where I'm standing. Then you're not looking closely enough. Superman turned back toward the city. Your director has been monitoring me since I arrived, developing contingencies. Batman is probably in this building right now planning the same thing. He looked directly at the stairwell where Cecil and Batman were hidden. Everyone's afraid of what I might do if I decide their way isn't working. He turned back to Mark. That fear is justified. I've seen what happens when good people insist on half measures while the world burns. I won't let it happen again. Superman descended back to the roof, walking past the stairwell without acknowledging Cecil and Batman's presence. The message was clear. He knew they were there, had known the entire time, and didn't care. Mark hovered in the air for a long moment after Superman left, silhouetted against the city lights. Then he landed on the roof and sat down, head in his hands. Cecil emerged from the stairwell. Batman stayed hidden. He's not wrong, Mark said quietly. About what? About the choices. About having to decide who lives and dies. Mark looked up and Cecil saw exhaustion there. Not physical. Something deeper. During the Invincible War, there was a moment where 3 different versions of me were killing people in 3 different locations. I could only stop one. Had to choose which 2 got to keep killing while I handled the 3rd. What did you do? I picked the location with the most people, saved 200 civilians, and let 30 die somewhere else. Mark's voice cracked slightly. Superman's math, and I hated myself for it. Still do. Cecil sat down beside him. Didn't offer comfort, just presence. The difference, Cecil said finally, is that you hate yourself for it. Superman doesn't. He's made peace with that math. Maybe even embraced it. And that's what makes him dangerous. Or effective. Both. That's the problem. Mark was quiet for a moment. Then, what if he's right? What if the only way to actually save people is to stop asking permission, to stop worrying about the lines we're not supposed to cross? Then we become him. We become your father. We become every dictator in history who convinced themselves that the end justified the means. Cecil stood. But more importantly, we lose the thing that makes us worth saving in the first place. The right to make our own mistakes. Even if people die because of them. Especially then. Because the alternative is someone like Superman deciding our mistakes for us. And I've spent the last 2 years cleaning up after someone who thought he knew better than everyone else. Cecil looked at the city. I'd rather die free than live under someone else's idea of perfection. Mark looked at the scars and the rebuilding and the stubborn, stupid resilience of people who refuse to be conquered, even by gods. He's going to do something, Mark said. Superman. He's not just going to sit there and wait for us to send him home. He's going to see something he thinks he can fix, and he's going to fix it. Whether we want him to or not. I know. And when he does, we're going to have to stop him. We'll build a plan. Can we? Cecil didn't answer immediately. Couldn't, because the honest answer was that he didn't know. Superman was stronger than Mark, more experienced than Adam Eve, more durable than the immortal. And he had the absolute certainty of someone who'd already watched the world burn once and decided he'd never let it happen again. We'll buy time, Cecil said finally. That's what we do. Batman emerged from the shadows after Mark left. He's vulnerable, Batman said. Mark, Superman. He needs Mark to validate him. Needs someone with similar power to agree that he's making the right choices. That's his blind spot. He's so focused on converting Mark to his perspective that he's not seeing the larger picture. Cecil considered that. You want to use Mark as bait. I want to use Mark as a mirror. Show Superman what he actually looks like when someone with his values refuses to compromise them. Batman moved to the roof edge, looking at the city the same way Superman and Mark had. In my world, Superman fell because he stopped listening to people who disagreed with him. Surrounded himself with those who'd already made the same choices he had. If we can keep Mark from becoming that person, we keep Superman isolated. We keep Superman uncertain. And uncertainty is the only weapon we have that might work without getting people killed. Cecil's earpiece crackled. Director, we've got activity at the Rift site. Energy signature is spiking. Cecil and Batman exchanged a look. How fast? Cecil asked. Fast. If this continues, we could be looking at another breach. Maybe bigger than the one that brought Superman through. Cecil was already moving toward the stairs. Batman matched his pace. If something else comes through, Batman said, Superman will respond. He'll see it as an opportunity to prove himself, to show you his way works. Then we control the narrative before he gets the chance. Cecil activated his comms. Mobilize containment teams. Full deployment. And get me Adam Eve. If that rift opens wider, we're going to need someone who can manipulate it at the molecular level. They reached the operations center to find controlled chaos. Technicians scrambling to stabilize monitoring equipment, energy readings fluctuating wildly, and on the main screen, the rift pulsing with a rhythm that looked almost organic, almost alive. Estimates on breach time, Cecil demanded. Unknown. Could be minutes. Could be hours. The pattern doesn't match anything from the Invincible War. Batman moved to the screen, studying the energy signature with the focus of someone parsing code. It's not random. There's structure here, not alive designed. Something on the other side is testing the rift, probing for weaknesses. Testing for what? Load capacity, dimensional stability. Someone's trying to force it open wider. Batman traced a pattern on the screen. And based on this progression, they're succeeding. Cecil felt ice in his stomach. The Invincible War had nearly destroyed them, and that was just alternate versions of Mark. If something bigger came through, something like the entities Batman had described from his world. Get Superman, Cecil said. His deputy looked shocked. Sir, you heard me. Wake him up, brief him, and tell him we need his assessment. Cecil turned to Batman. You were right. He needs to see this world doesn't want his brand of order. But first we need to make sure there's a world left to reject him. Batman nodded slowly. Calculated risk. The only kind I take. 20 minutes later, Superman stood in the operations center looking at the rift data with an expression Cecil couldn't quite read. Wonder Woman flanked him, hand near her sword. Mark had arrived moments after still wearing the exhaustion of someone who'd been having a very long night. The technicians had frozen at Superman's entrance. Most of them had only heard the name, seen the footage. Now, they were seeing the reality. Energy signature overlaps with anomalies we logged from Omni-Man. One of the senior analysts reported voice tight. Not a perfect match, but close enough to make me nervous. Mark's head snapped up. What? Something with similar cellular density, same kind of bioelectric profile. Cecil pulled up the comparison data. Could be Viltrumite. Could be something that registers the same way. We don't know. And Superman studied the screen. How long until breach? At current rate of destabilization, 90 minutes, maybe less. Then we close it. We can't, Cecil said. Not without understanding the physics. If we force it closed with that much energy pushing from the other side, we could trigger a larger cascade. Pull through everything within a mile radius of the breach point. Then we contain whatever comes through. You mean you contain it? Mark said. He didn't sound grateful, just resigned. Superman looked at him. If something comes through that rift powerful enough to destabilize dimensional barriers, the list of candidates narrows considerably, and none of them are good. You don't know that. I know breaches don't happen by accident. The room went very quiet at that, because he was right, and everyone there knew it. We have 43 people 3 blocks from here who are about to die, Cecil said, changing tactics earlier in the night. Now they had something bigger. Armed group was just the warm-up. This is the real threat. Superman's eyes moved from the screen to Cecil, reading him, measuring intent. You want me to close it? Superman said. I want you to assess whether you can close it without making things worse. Cecil pulled up the energy projections. If you overload the rift with sustained heat vision, you might collapse it. Or you might destabilize it further. We don't have enough data. You never have enough data. Superman moved closer to the screen. But you make the choice anyway. That's what you were trying to teach me earlier, wasn't it? That sometimes the only option is the one that might fail catastrophically. Cecil held his gaze. I was trying to teach you that certainty is a luxury we don't have, and that making choices without it doesn't make you a god. It makes you desperate. For a moment, no one moved. Then Superman nodded. Show me the rift. The rift had grown. What started as a 20-foot gash in reality now stretched nearly 40 feet across, pulsing with a rhythm that made Mark's teeth ache. He floated 100 yards back, watching Superman and Wonder Woman assess the breach with the clinical detachment of surgeons examining a wound. They stood at the edge of the industrial district, where the rift had first opened, surrounded by a perimeter of GDA forces that everyone knew were functionally useless. Reanimen with heavy weapons, containment vehicles with energy dampeners, men and women who'd signed up to protect Earth from threats they could barely comprehend, now facing something that made the Invincible War look like a contained incident. Cecil's voice crackled through Mark's earpiece. Adam Eve is 2 minutes out. Stall if you can. Mark almost laughed. Stall. As if he had any authority here. Superman had made that clear on the rooftop. This wasn't Mark's decision. It wasn't Cecil's decision. It was the decision of whoever was strong enough to make it and willing to live with the consequences. The energy pattern is accelerating, Batman said from his position near the GDA command vehicle. He'd pulled up holographic displays showing the rift's dimensional stress points. If it continues at this rate, full breach in 40 minutes. Superman drifted closer to the rift, close enough that the wash of distorted space made his cape ripple like it was underwater. He extended one hand, and Mark saw his eyes narrow as he processed what he was feeling. It's not random, Superman said. There's a pulse, like a heartbeat. Something on the other side is using it as a doorway. Can you close it? Cecil asked over the open channel. Superman was quiet for a moment, studying the dimensional tear with an intensity that reminded Mark of his father. That same focus, that same absolute confidence in his ability to solve the problem through force. Yes, Superman said finally, but not cleanly. Wonder Woman moved to his side hand on her sword. How much collateral? Unknown. The energy release could vaporize everything within a quarter mile, or it could collapse inward and take half the city with it. Superman looked back at the command vehicle. You have 5 minutes to clear the evacuation radius. Then I act. Not a question. Not a request. A statement of intent. Cecil's response was immediate. Invincible, get those civilians clear. Wonder Woman, North Perimeter. Anyone who won't evacuate voluntarily gets carried. Wonder Woman glanced at Superman. He gave a slight nod, and she moved. Not because Cecil had ordered her, because Superman had permitted it. Mark felt his jaw tighten. This was it. The moment Superman stopped pretending he was cooperating and started making it clear he was allowing them to pretend they had authority. He dove toward the nearest residential block, using his enhanced vision to scan for heat signatures. 12 people still in their homes, some sleeping, some too scared or stubborn to leave. He went through windows, through walls, when he had to pulling people into the air and flying them beyond the evacuation line. A woman screamed when he grabbed her. An elderly man swung at him with a cane. A child clung to his neck and cried about a dog left behind. Mark went back for the dog. On his fourth trip, he saw Adam Eve arrive. She flew straight to the rift, her body beginning to glow with that pink-purple energy that meant she was ramping up her molecular manipulation. She extended both hands toward the tear, and Mark felt the air itself begin to respond. Molecules rearranging, atomic bonds reforming. Eve was trying to seal the rift from the inside out, rebuilding reality one particle at a time. For 30 seconds, it looked like it might work. The rift's edges began to stabilize, the pulsing rhythm slowing. Then something pushed back. The rift exploded outward, doubling in size. Eve was thrown backward, her body trailing energy like a comet. Mark caught her before she hit the ground, feeling the heat radiating from her skin. "Mental blocks?" she gasped. "Something's blocking me. I can manipulate everything except the rift structure itself. It's like trying to rebuild a wall while someone's actively tearing it down from the other side." Superman had watched the entire attempt without moving. Now he rose into the air directly in front of the rift. "Time's up," he said. His eyes began to glow red. Mark saw it happen in stages. First, the heat vision twin beams of concentrated thermal energy pouring into the dimensional tear. The air around Superman began to shimmer, then ignite as temperatures climbed past anything that should exist outside a sun's core. The rift screamed. There was no other word for it. Reality itself made a sound, like metal tearing like bones, breaking like every wrong noise in the world, compressed into a single moment of absolute wrongness. And then it began to collapse. Not cleanly, not safely. The rift folded inward like a wound, cauterized too aggressively dimensional energy, backwashing in waves that sent GDA vehicles tumbling. Mark threw himself in front of Eve, using his body to shield her from the worst of it. He felt his skin burn, felt his bones creak under pressure that shouldn't exist in three-dimensional space. Superman held the beam. 30 seconds. A minute. Mark couldn't tell anymore. Time felt broken, near the rift, moments stretching and compressing randomly. He saw Wonder Woman brace herself against the shock wave, her boots carving trenches in asphalt. He saw Batman grab a GDA tech who'd been thrown from her vehicle, pulling her to safety behind the command truck. And he saw Superman's eyes, still glowing red, still pouring impossible heat into a wound in reality, while his cape burned and his suit began to char, and his expression never changed at all. Then finally, the rift collapsed. The sound it made was somehow worse than the scream. A wet, sucking noise like the universe exhaling something it couldn't digest. The dimensional tear folded into itself and vanished, leaving behind nothing but scorched air and the smell of ozone. Superman descended slowly. His cape was mostly gone, burned away by the energies he had been channeling. His suit was scorched black in places, though already the damage seemed to be fading as his cells regenerated. He landed without ceremony, without triumph. "It's done," Superman said. Mark staggered to his feet, helping Eve up. She was still shaking, her powers having been pushed to their limit and found wanting. Around them, the GDA forces were picking themselves up, assessing damage, counting casualties. Cecil's voice came through the comms, tight and controlled. "Casualty report, 3 KIA, Tech Sergeant Chen, Private Morrison, Specialist Rodriguez, crushed when their vehicle was thrown by the shockwave. 12 more injured." But the rift was closed. Earth was safe. Mark looked at the 3 body bags being loaded into ambulances and felt something crack inside him. "You knew," he said. His voice carried across the destroyed industrial zone. "You knew there'd be casualties before you started." Superman met his gaze. "Yes. And you did it anyway. Would you prefer I let whatever was trying to force its way through succeed? Let it rampage through your city while we debated the ethics of acceptable losses?" Superman's voice remained level, reasonable. 3 died. Thousands lived. They're not numbers. Mark's fists clenched. They had names, families' lives. I heard 3 heartbeats stop. Superman's expression didn't change. I knew when it happened. I made that trade deliberately. He gestured at the space where the rift had been. You want me to feel bad about it? I can't afford that luxury. Because I've seen what happens when people in our position prioritize guilt over necessity. His eyes hardened. I watched Metropolis burn because I wasn't willing to cross that line. Because I thought there was always another way. A better way. And 5 million people paid the price for my hesitation. Mark felt his anger warring with something else. Something that looked uncomfortably like recognition. You can hate me for it, Superman continued. Most of my world does. But they're alive to hate me, because I stopped asking permission to protect them. Then why are you here? The question came from behind them. The immortals stood at the edge of the destruction, having arrived too late to help, but early enough to witness the aftermath. If you've got it all figured out, why do you need us to agree with you? Superman turned to face him. I don't need your agreement. I'm explaining my reasoning as a courtesy. I've seen tyrants who believed they were saints. The immortal's voice was flat, cold. 3,000 years of experience compressed into 7 words. That's the worst kind. And I've seen heroes let people die rather than make hard choices. Superman's voice never rose, never hardened, just stated facts. Which is more dangerous? The immortal's hand moved to his weapon. Guess we'll find out. The temperature dropped. Mark felt it immediately. That shift in the air when people with the power to level cities stopped posturing and started calculating angles of attack. He moved without thinking, putting himself between the immortal and Superman. Don't, Mark said. Not here, not now. Move aside, kid. The immortal's eyes never left Superman. This is exactly what I told Cecil would happen. I'm not my father, Mark's voice cracked. And Superman isn't Omni-Man. Isn't he? The immortal gestured at the body bags. 3 dead because he decided their lives were worth less than closing that rift. Because I saved thousands. Superman hadn't moved, hadn't tensed, just stood there with absolute confidence. Because I'm not asking to rule you. Because when this is done, when we find a way to send me home, I'll leave. Your father never planned to leave, did he, Mark? Mark wanted to argue. Wanted to find some fundamental difference between Superman's cold mathematics and Omni-Man's brutal pragmatism. But standing there looking at the man who'd just saved thousands by accepting 3 deaths, he couldn't see the line anymore. Stand down. Cecil's voice cut through the tension. He'd left the command vehicle and was walking toward them, tablet in hand. All of you. We've got a bigger problem. He pulled up footage on the tablet. Security camera recordings from a dozen different angles, all showing the same thing the moment before the rift collapsed. The moment when something had tried to push through from the other side. We didn't get a clear image, Ben, Cecil said. But the energy readings were solid enough to analyze. Whatever was trying to force its way through wasn't passive drift. It was deliberate. Sustained pressure like a ship's drive trying to force a sealed door. He pulled up the energy throughput data. Mark felt his stomach drop. The readings showed massive power expenditure. Not the profile of a single entity, but something mechanical, intentional. And the signature overlapped uncomfortably with the anomalies they'd logged from Omni-Man. Something Viltrumite adjacent just tried to establish a beachhead on Earth, Cecil said quietly. And based on the force they were using, they're not done trying. Mark looked at the readings, then at Superman, then at the smoking crater where the rift had been. 3 GDA soldiers had died to close a door. How many would die when whoever was on the other side decided to knock it down? "This is what I've been trying to tell you," Superman said. He wasn't gloating, just tired. "You're not ready for what's coming. You're still fighting the last war, still processing trauma, still trying to figure out how to be heroes in a world that's outgrown the concept." He looked at Mark specifically. "I can show you how to make the choices that save the most lives, how to accept the costs that come with that power." Superman gestured at the destruction around them. "Or you can keep pretending there's a way to do this that doesn't require sacrifice. And when the next invasion comes, because it will come, you can explain to the survivors why you chose sentiment over survival." Mark wanted to hit him, wanted to scream that Superman was wrong, that there had to be another way, that they didn't have to become monsters to fight monsters. But he'd fought 16 versions of himself last week. Had seen what happened when people with his power decided they were the only ones who could fix the world. And he'd watched Superman close that rift, save those thousands of lives, while accepting the cost of 3 deaths with the calm efficiency of someone doing arithmetic. The worst part wasn't that Superman was wrong. The worst part was that Mark couldn't prove he wasn't right. "Meeting," Cecil said. 1 hour, everyone. We need to talk about what happens next." He walked away, leaving Mark standing in the smoking ruins with Superman and the Immortal and the body bags being loaded into ambulances. Eve touched his arm. "Mark, I don't know," he said before she could finish. "I don't know what we do. I don't know if he's right. I don't know anything anymore." Skeeter, he flew away before anyone could respond. Flew high above the city, above the clouds, to where the air was thin and cold, and he could pretend the water on his face was just condensation. Below him, Chicago continued its grim arithmetic. Rescue workers pulled bodies from rubble. Families received notifications that would destroy them. 3 more names added to a list that already had too many. And in the GDA facility, Superman stood in his temporary quarters and reviewed his own arithmetic. The force required to collapse the rift, the probable casualties from the energy release, the acceptable loss ratio based on population density. He'd calculated it perfectly. 3 deaths. 3 heartbeats stopped. 3 families broken. Necessary. He pulled up a file on his suit's internal computer, a file he'd carried with him from his world. Names and faces. 5 million of them. Everyone who died in Metropolis because he'd hesitated, because he'd thought there was a better way. 3 names versus 5 million. The math was simple. He closed the file and began reviewing contingency plans for Viltrumite invasion scenarios. Because Cecil was right about one thing, something was paying attention now. Something with the resources to try forcing dimensional barriers open through brute power. And when it came, not if when Earth would need someone willing to make the choices its heroes wouldn't. Someone who understood that salvation was always purchased with sacrifice. Someone like him. In the command center, Cecil watched Superman through surveillance feeds and made notes. 3 soldiers dead. Thousands saved. The same brutal calculus Cecil had authorized 100 times before. Different resources, different scales, same math. The only difference was Cecil still woke up seeing their faces, and Superman didn't. Batman appeared beside him, silent as always. "He's won the argument." "I know. Mark can't fight him now." Not when Superman just proved everything he's been saying. That sometimes sacrifice is necessary. I know that too. Cecil pulled up the energy throughput data. But we've got a bigger problem. If something with that kind of power is trying to force its way through and it registers Viltrumite adjacent, then Mark's people are coming, and they'll make Superman's methods look gentle by comparison. Cecil closed the file and began drafting new contingency protocols. Plans within plans. Backup strategies for the backup strategies. Because that's what he did. He planned for the worst and prayed it would be enough. Even though he knew deep down it probably wouldn't be. He'd done the math too, and the math never cared how you felt about it. The meeting happened in a room designed for war councils. Reinforced walls, no windows. Exits that required 3 different security clearances to open. Cecil had learned a long time ago that the most important conversations happened in places where no one could leave until they were finished. Mark sat between Eve and the Immortal, feeling like a kid at the adults' table. Superman stood near the far wall, Wonder Woman at his side. Batman occupied a corner where the shadows were thickest, somehow managing to be both present and absent simultaneously. A dozen other figures filled the remaining space, GDA brass remnants of the Guardians of the Globe analysts who'd been tracking dimensional anomalies since the Invincible War ended. Cecil stood at the head of the table, tablet in hand, looking like he hadn't slept in days. He probably hadn't. "Let's establish facts," Cecil said. 3 days ago, a dimensional rift opened and pulled Superman and Wonder Woman through from their reality. Yesterday, that rift destabilized further. Something on the other side attempted to force a larger breach. Superman collapsed the rift at the cost of 3 GDA personnel and significant structural damage to the industrial district. He pulled up a holographic display, energy readings, pressure signatures, mathematical models that made Mark's head hurt. Analysis confirms the entity attempting breach was using sustained force equivalent to a capital ship's main drive. The energy signature overlaps with Viltrumite bioelectric profiles, but isn't a perfect match. Could be technology. Could be something we haven't encountered before. "It's reconnaissance," Batman said. Everyone turned to look at him. Whatever tried to push through wasn't attempting invasion. It was testing Earth's defenses, measuring response time, cataloging capabilities. Cecil nodded slowly. "That was my assessment as well." "Then they'll be back," the Immortal said. "Viltrumites don't scout unless they're planning to conquer. And they don't give up just because you slam the door in their face." Mark felt everyone's eyes shift to him, the weight of his father's legacy pressing down like gravity. "I don't know what they want," Mark said quietly. "My dad left. Said he was done with Earth. But that doesn't mean the Empire is." "Your father was a scout too," Superman said. "Not accusatory, just factual. Sent here to evaluate Earth's viability as a resource. He failed his mission when he let personal attachment override duty. The Empire won't make that mistake twice. You don't know that. I know conquest. I know what it looks like when someone stronger decides your home is theirs now." Superman's voice carried the weight of experience. "The only question is what you do about it." "We fight," the Immortal said immediately. "With what?" Wonder Woman spoke for the first time since the meeting began. "I've reviewed your capabilities, your technology, your hero population. You barely survived the Invincible War, and that was alternate versions of one individual. A coordinated Viltrumite assault would overwhelm you in hours." "Then we'll fight anyway." The Immortal's hand rested on his weapon. "That's what we do." That's what you die doing. Superman moved away from the wall, commanding attention without trying. I've watched civilizations make that choice. Watched them throw themselves at the superior force because pride mattered more than survival. It never ends well. So, what's your solution? Cecil's voice was carefully neutral. Roll over, accept whatever terms they offer. Superman met his gaze. You can't win this your way, so you'll adapt, or you'll die. Those are the options. The room went very quiet. Explain, Cecil said. Superman gestured at the holographic display. You're facing an invasion by a species that views humans as evolutionary dead ends. They're stronger, faster, more durable, and they've been conquering worlds for thousands of years. You can't beat them with conventional tactics. You can't beat them with hope and heroic gestures. You can only beat them by being willing to do what they won't expect. Which is, make Earth more expensive to conquer than it's worth. Turn every city into a fortress, every civilian into a combatant. Make them pay for every inch of ground in blood and resources until they decide it's easier to go somewhere else. Mark felt sick. You're talking about turning Earth into a war zone. Earth is already a war zone. You just haven't admitted it yet. Superman looked directly at him. Your father could have conquered this planet in a week. The only reason he didn't was personal weakness. The next Viltrumite they send won't have that problem. And when they come, they won't negotiate. They'll just take. So we become them. Eve's voice cut through the tension. We militarize everything. Turn ourselves into what we're fighting. You become survivors. Wonder Woman's expression was steel. There's no virtue in losing gracefully. Batman stirred in his corner. There's a middle path. Everyone turned toward him. Superman's right about the threat assessment, Batman said. Viltrumites are functionally invincible by human standards. Direct confrontation is suicide, but Earth has something they don't. What? Cecil asked. Creativity, desperation, and a history of defeating things that should have killed us. Batman pulled up new data on the holographic display. Viltrumites are biological supremacists. They rely on raw power and assume it trumps everything else. That's a blindness we can exploit. He highlighted specific readings from the rift collapse. The dimensional barrier is weak now, scarred. Whatever tried to push through left a signature we can track. We use that signature to destabilize any future breach attempts, make it impossible for them to establish a foothold. And if they come through anyway, the Immortal asked. Then we don't fight them head on. We evacuate population centers, deny them strategic resources, make occupation more expensive than withdrawal. Batman's eyes were cold. If containment fails, we deny them any value in taking Earth. Scorched Earth is last resort, but it's still on the table. Mark stared at him. You're talking about burning our own cities. I'm talking about survival. You want to keep Earth free, you show them freedom costs more than slavery. Cecil was quiet for a long moment, processing. Then, both plans assume we have time to prepare. What if we don't? As if in answer, alarms began screaming throughout the facility. Cecil's tablet lit up with priority alerts. His face went pale. We've got a breach, he said. Not the rift site. Somewhere new. Reports coming in from... He stopped, looked up. Cleveland. Something just came through over downtown Cleveland. The room erupted. Orders being shouted. Personnel mobilizing. Mark was already moving toward the door when Cecil's voice cut through the chaos. Invincible, wait. Mark turned. If this is what we think it is, Cecil said quietly, if this is a Viltrumite coming through, you're the only one who has a chance of fighting them to a standstill. The only one who knows how they think how they fight. I know. Then you need to understand something. Cecil moved closer, voice dropping so only Mark could hear. If you can't stop them, I will. I have contingencies that will level Cleveland rather than let a Viltrumite establish a position there. We'll lose tens of thousands, but I won't risk letting them use that city as a staging ground for conquest. Mark felt his blood run cold. You wouldn't. I would. I have. I will again if I have to. Cecil's expression was granite. That's what it takes. You understand that now, or you learn it later, but either way, the math doesn't change. He stepped back, voice rising to normal volume. You have authorization to use lethal force if required. Save who you can, kill what you must. Just don't let them take the city. Mark flew. He heard Superman behind him, matching his speed effortlessly. Wonder Woman on his other side. The immortal further back, struggling to keep pace. They were an arrow aimed at Cleveland, at whatever had just torn a hole in reality and decided Earth looked vulnerable. Batman's voice came through the comms. Preliminary readings show single target. Mass consistent with Viltrumite physiology. Heat signature elevated, they came through hot, probably burning off dimensional transit energy. Hostile, Mark asked. Unknown. They haven't engaged anyone yet. Just standing in the middle of the street. They reached Cleveland in minutes. Mark saw it immediately. The scorched crater where something had materialized. The scatter of abandoned cars, the figure standing at the center of it all. Not Viltrumite. Flash. He stood in the middle of the destruction suit, scorched and smoking, looking like he'd been dragged through hell backward. His eyes were wild, unfocused, and there was blood running from his nose and ears. Barry. Superman's voice carried shock. Actual emotion breaking through the controlled exterior. Flash looked up at them, tried to speak, collapsed. Mark caught him before he hit the ground. Flash was burning up his metabolism, running so hot it was cooking him from the inside. Mark could feel it through his gloves. He needs medical, Eve said, landing beside them. Now. Superman was already moving, gathering Flash carefully. The GDA facility. Cecil's doctors. No. Flash's voice was a rasp. No time. The rift. I tried to. I went back through. Tried to seal it from the other side. It's not stable. Barry, what happened? Superman's voice was gentle now, almost human. Speed force. Interference. Dimensional barriers are breaking down. Not just yours, all of them. Flash coughed and blood came with it. There's something in the space between realities. Something using the rifts like doorways, testing them. Mark felt ice spread through his chest. What kind of something? Flash's eyes found Mark's. They were bloodshot tears mixing with blood. Not Viltrumite. But it probes like one. It adapts, learns. I tried to follow me through. I barely... Another cough. Sealed the pathway behind me. Bought you time. Not much. Days, maybe. He grabbed Superman's arm with shaking hands. Clark, you have to close all the rifts. Every single one. If they stay open, it'll find a way through. And when it does... He didn't finish. Just passed out, his metabolism finally shutting down from the strain. They got him to the GDA medical facility in minutes. Doctors swarmed, hooking up equipment that looked alien, even to Mark's eyes. Flash's vitals were a nightmare, heart rate too fast to count body temperature that should have killed him, cellular damage consistent with dimensional radiation exposure. Cecil pulled Superman and Mark into a side room while the doctors worked. "Talk," Cecil said. Superman looked older than he had minutes before. Tired. Barry Allen, the Flash. In our world, he was insurgency. One of the few who defected from regime when he realized what we'd become. He paused. He's faster than anything that exists. If he says dimensional barriers are breaking down, if he says something's testing the rifts, then we've got bigger problems than Viltrumites, Mark finished. Cecil pulled up the rift data. We've been tracking 6 major instability points since your arrival. Secondary rifts forming at sites of high-energy discharge. We assumed they were just aftershocks from the primary breach. But if Flash is right, if something's deliberately destabilizing dimensional barriers, it's not random. Batman had materialized behind them, reviewing the data over Cecil's shoulder. Look at the pattern. The rifts aren't forming randomly. They're forming in a network. A web. He traced connections between the sites on the holographic display. Someone's building infrastructure, establishing multiple breach points so they can't all be closed at once. Force us to spread our resources, dilute our response capability. That's military planning, Wonder Woman said. Coordinated, professional. That's Viltrumite planning, the Immortal corrected. They did the same thing when they conquered Thraxa. Opened multiple fronts simultaneously, overwhelmed the defenders. Mark looked at the web of breach points. 6 sites. Maybe more they hadn't detected yet. Each one a potential invasion route. Each one requiring someone powerful enough to close it before something came through. "We don't have the resources," he said quietly. "We barely closed 1 rift. You want us to close 6 simultaneously? We don't have a choice," Cecil said. "If those rifts stay open, then we shut them down." Superman's voice cut through the discussion like a blade. "We divide our forces, cover each site, close the rifts before whatever's coming through can establish position." "That's exactly what they want," Batman said. "Divide and conquer. Classic strategy. They separate us, hit us when we're isolated, eliminate us individually. So we stay together and let the rifts stay open." Superman shook his head. "That's not a strategy. That's paralysis. That's caution." Batman met his gaze. "We don't close them first. We dampen them, stabilize the worst, then seal them sequentially. Hit them in order of instability together fast enough that nothing gets through while we're working." The tension between them was palpable. 2 men who'd fought each other across realities, now forced to cooperate against a threat neither fully understood. Cecil's tablet chimed. He glanced at it, and his expression darkened. "Flash is stable. Barely. He's conscious." They crowded into the medical room. Flash looked like death hooked up to enough equipment to run a small city. But his eyes were open, and when he saw Superman, he tried to smile. Still, saving the world, without permission. Flash's voice was weak, but carried a hint of his old humor. "Barry," Superman moved to the bedside. "What did you see in the space between realities?" Flash's smile faded. "Nothing. That's what was wrong. Usually the Speed Force lets me see everything, past, present, probable futures. But in that space there was nothing. Just void. And something moving through it. Building roots. Like a network." "Viltrumite?" Mark asked. "Maybe. Maybe their technology, maybe something they're working with. Flash looked at him. You're Mark, right? The one whose father was the scout. Yeah. Your people. They're methodical. Patient. If they're building this network, it's not for a small incursion. It's for something that needs infrastructure. Flash coughed. I bought you time. Sealed the pathway I used. But there are other pathways, other routes through the dimensional membrane. Whatever's coming will find one. The room went cold. How long? Superman asked. Days. Maybe less if they push hard. Flash looked at him. Clark, listen to me. This isn't Metropolis. This isn't Joker or Luthor or any threat you've faced before. You can't punch your way through dimensional mathematics. You can't intimidate physics. You can only prepare. I'm listening. Then hear this. Flash's voice dropped to a whisper, but every word carried weight. Whatever's coming doesn't care about your regime or his insurgency or Earth's politics. It's testing, probing, learning how this reality responds to pressure. You want to save this world. Stop fighting Bruce's war. Start working together, because divided you're just making their job easier. He grabbed Superman's wrist with surprising strength. Remember what it felt like to be afraid. To not be certain. That's what keeps you human. Flash's grip loosened. The monitors showed him slipping back into unconsciousness. The doctors moved in adjusting medications, checking vitals. Cecil ushered everyone out of the room. In the hallway, they stood in silence for a long moment. Finally, Mark spoke. So what do we do? Cecil looked at his tablet, at the web of rift sites, at the casualty projections, at the mathematical certainty that they didn't have enough people, enough time, enough resources to seal 6-dimensional breaches before something came through one of them. We do what we always do, Cecil said. We buy time. We prepare. We hope it's enough. He looked at Superman. And we accept help from people we don't trust, because the alternative is extinction. Superman nodded slowly. Then let's start preparing. We've got 6 rifts to close and not enough time to argue about methodology. Agreed, Batman said. But we do it smart. Dampen first, seal second. Sequential but fast. We can't afford to split up. That'll take precision, Wonder Woman said. Better than dying alone. Batman pulled up tactical data. We need a plan. Real strategy, not just overwhelming force. They moved to the briefing room, began laying out coordinates, power requirements, evacuation routes, professional, focused, setting aside their differences because the alternative was worse. Mark watched them work and felt something shift. Not trust. Not even cooperation. Just recognition that they were all standing at the edge of the same cliff and falling alone wouldn't help anyone. But in the medical bay, Flash slept fitfully. And in his fever dreams, he saw what was coming. Saw the moment when dimensional barriers would fail completely. When the web of rifts would activate simultaneously. When something vast and patient would step through and examine Earth like a specimen under glass. He tried to scream a warning. But the monitors just beeped steadily, recording a heartbeat too fast for human measurement. And outside in the cold space between dimensions, something noticed Flash's pathway had closed. Noted it, adapted, found another route. The first rift they hit was in Detroit. Mark stood 1,000 feet above the city, watching Batman's drones map the dimensional weak point with surgical precision. The rift wasn't open yet, just a scar in reality pulsing with that same sick rhythm that made his teeth ache. Like a scab someone kept picking at, trying to tear it open from the other side. Energy signature stable. Eve reported from her position on the western approach. Her hands glowed faintly, ready to manipulate matter at the molecular level the moment they gave the signal. No active breach detected. Yet, Superman added. He floated near the rift's center, eyes scanning frequencies Mark couldn't see. The pressure's building. Whatever's on the other side is pushing harder than before. Cecil's voice crackled through the comms. Evacuation complete. 4-block radius clear. You're authorized to proceed. Mark looked down at the empty streets. 4,000 people displaced in 90 minutes. Homes abandoned. Businesses shuttered. Lives interrupted because something none of them understood was trying to claw its way into their reality. The math never cared how you felt about it. Batman, Superman said. You're up. Batman's drone swarm converged on the rift, each unit carrying a modified energy dampener based on the data they'd pulled from Flash's Speed Force radiation signature. The theory was simple. If dimensional barriers were breaking down, they could reinforce them temporarily. Buy time to seal the rifts properly. The theory had never been tested. The drones activated simultaneously. Mark felt the change immediately, the air pressure dropping, his enhanced hearing picking up a frequency that shouldn't exist. The rift's pulsing slowed, steadied. The scar tissue of broken reality began to stabilize. It's working, Eve breathed. Then something pushed back. The rift exploded outward, not opening, but bulging like a bubble being blown from the other side. Half of Batman's drones sparked and died, their dampeners overloaded. The rest struggled to maintain position as dimensional energy washed over them. Compensating, Batman's voice was tight. But the pressure's too strong. We need to seal it now, while the dampeners are still holding. Superman's eyes began to glow red. Everyone clear the approach vector. Mark knew what was coming. They'd practiced this in the briefing room, run simulations, calculated acceptable margins of error. Superman would pour concentrated heat into the rift, cauterizing it closed like he'd done before. Simple, brutal, effective. But something felt wrong. Wait, Mark said. The pressure signature, it's not random anymore. It's responding. Batman's holographic display flickered. He's right. The entity on the other side is adjusting, matching our frequency, learning. Then we seal it before it learns enough, Superman said. No. The word came out before Mark could stop it. If it's learning, if it's adapting to our tactics, then closing this one just teaches it how to counter the next attempt. Superman looked at him. So what do you suggest? Leave it open. I suggest we figure out what it wants before we blind ourselves fighting it. It wants Earth. That's what conquerors do. My father wanted Earth, Mark shot back. And he talked to me first. Tried to convince me to join him. If this is Viltrumite planning, they don't just smash through doors. They evaluate, negotiate, find the path of least resistance. Wonder Woman's voice cut through their argument. If they wanted to negotiate, they would have sent an envoy. This is a siege engine, not a diplomat. Then why haven't they pushed through yet? Mark gestured at the stabilized rift. They've had 3 days, multiple breach points, the resources to force at least one door open. But they're not forcing. They're probing, testing. That's not conquest behavior. That's intelligence gathering. Superman studied him for a long moment. You want to talk to it? I want to understand what we're fighting before we commit to a strategy that might make things worse. Making things worse would be letting them establish a beachhead while we debate their intentions. Superman's eyes were still glowing, ready to fire. I've seen this pattern before. Watched civilizations hesitate while the enemy prepared. By the time they acted, it was too late. Cecil's voice cut in. Invincible makes a point. If this is reconnaissance, closing the rift might just tell them we're reactive, not proactive. Give them better data for the next attempt. Or it tells them we're capable of defense and forces them to reconsider the cost-benefit analysis, Batman added. Either way, we're burning time. Make a decision. Mark looked at the rift, at the pulsing scar in reality that something vast and patient was using as a window. His father had come through a rift like this once, had stood on Earth and evaluated whether it was worth conquering. Had decided yes until Mark made him reconsider. What if whatever was on the other side could be made to reconsider too? Let me try something, Mark said. Before anyone could stop him, he flew directly toward the rift. The dimensional energy hit him like a wall of pressure. His vision blurred, his equilibrium screamed that up and down had stopped meaning anything. But he pushed through, getting close enough to feel the void on the other side. Close enough to be seen. I'm Mark Grayson, he said, not knowing if anyone could hear. My father was Nolan, Omni-Man, Viltrumite Scout. If you're from the Empire, if you're evaluating Earth for conquest. He stopped, swallowed. Then you should know we're not worth it. We're not valuable enough to justify the cost. We're broken, traumatized, barely holding together after our own war. Taking us would be expensive. Holding us would be impossible. Silence, just the hum of dimensional energy and his own heartbeat. Then something changed. The pressure on the rift shifted. Not withdrawing, just pausing. Like someone on the other side had stopped pushing and started listening. Mark felt his throat tighten. If you're not from the Empire, if you're something else. He thought about Flash's description. The void, the network, the patient probing. Then you should know that we've survived things you haven't seen yet. Survived each other. Survived gods and monsters and our own worst impulses. We're not easy prey. The rift pulsed once, twice, a rhythm that felt almost like communication. Then it stabilized completely. The pressure vanished. The dimensional energy smoothed out. The scar in reality stopped pulsing and simply waited. Mark backed away slowly, rejoining the others. Superman's eyes had stopped glowing, but his expression was unreadable. What did you do? Eve asked. I don't know. Talked to it maybe. Showed it we're not just reactive. Mark looked at Batman. Is it still active? Batman studied his displays. Active but dormant. Like someone left a door unlocked but isn't trying to open it yet. He pulled up comparative data. The other 5 rifts just changed status too. Same pattern. They've all gone dormant simultaneously. Cecil's voice was tight. Either you just bought us time or you told them exactly how vulnerable we are. Or both, Superman said. If this is strategic reconnaissance, you just gave them valuable intelligence about Earth's psychology. That we negotiate, that we hesitate, that we can be influenced by appeals to logic and cost-benefit analysis. Mark felt his stomach drop. I know what you were trying to do. The question is whether it worked or whether you just made yourself a target. Superman's gaze was intense, because if whoever's on the other side is Viltrumite, they now know Earth has someone with your father's power who thinks like a human. That's either an asset they'll want to eliminate or a weakness they'll exploit. Before Mark could respond, alarms screamed across all channels. "New contact," Cecil snapped. "Not a rift. Atmospheric entry. Single target coming in fast." Batman pulled up tracking data. "Mass consistent with Viltrumite. Speed exceeds anything we've recorded except Omni-Man. ETA to your position 30 seconds. Mark's blood went cold. They were listening. "They were waiting," Superman corrected. "You showed them it was time to make direct contact." The figure hit the ground a quarter-mile away with enough force to crater the street. Mark saw them immediately, Viltrumite colors white and red. But the design was different. More angular. More military. And when they stood, Mark felt recognition like a knife. Not his father. Someone older, harder. Someone who wore authority like armor and looked at Earth the way a general looks at a battlefield. The figure flew toward them, stopping 50 feet away. Not attacking. Just hovering there, scanning each of them in turn, with eyes that had seen civilizations rise and fall. When they spoke, their voice carried across the distance without effort. "I am Conquest, Battle Commander of the Viltrumite Empire." The words were precise, clinical. "I come bearing terms." Mark felt the world tilt. Conquest. He knew that name. His father had mentioned it once in a tone that mixed respect and fear. Conquest was what Viltrumites became when they'd been fighting long enough that winning was automatic. When killing had become as natural as breathing. "Terms. Yeah," Cecil said over the comms. "That's new. Viltrumites don't negotiate." "They do when they're not sure they'll win," Batman replied. "Stay sharp. This could be a feint." But Superman was already moving forward, positioning himself between Conquest and the group. Not aggressive. Just making it clear who would be handling this conversation. "I'm Superman," he said. "You're not from this reality." Conquest's eyes narrowed slightly. "No, neither are you. Kryptonian by the cellular density. Interesting, this world collects strays. What do you want with Earth?" "Want?" Conquest smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. "Nothing. Want implies desire. I'm here to inform you of reality." He gestured at the dormant rift behind them. "You've been testing dimensional barriers, forcing rifts open, pulling entities through, creating instability across multiple realities. The Empire monitors such disturbances. When we detected the signature here, Omni-Man's homeworld, his failed assignment, we investigated." Mark's heart was hammering. "My father's not here." "I know." He abandoned his post, allowed personal attachment to override mission parameters. Under normal circumstances, Earth would have been purged for his failure. Conquest's expression didn't change. "But circumstances are not normal. The dimensional instability you've created is significant. It's drawn attention from forces that make the Viltrumite Empire look like children." Flash had been right. "So you're here to save us?" Wonder Woman's voice dripped skepticism. "I'm here to manage a problem. Earth has become a dimensional weak point. A wound in reality that's attracting predators." Conquest looked at Mark specifically. "Your father was supposed to prepare this world for absorption into the Empire. Clean conquest. Minimal casualties. Instead, he left it vulnerable, and now entities are using it as a testing ground for dimensional breach technology." "What entities?" Batman demanded. "Unknown. But their methods are familiar. Patient, methodical, building infrastructure before commitment. That's either very intelligent planning or something ancient that's learned patience from experience." Conquest pulled up a holographic display from his wrist device. The Empire has detected similar patterns in 17 other realities. All of them featured dimensional weak points. All of them were eventually consumed by whatever's probing from the other side. The air felt thin suddenly. "So, what are your terms?" Superman asked. "Simple. You have two options." Conquest held up one finger. "First option, surrender Earth to the Empire. We'll stabilize the dimensional barriers, seal the rifts, and integrate your population into our structure. You'll lose autonomy, but gain protection from whatever's hunting you." "No," Mark said immediately. Conquest continued as if he hadn't spoken. "Second option, you handle the problem yourselves. Close the rifts, defend against whatever comes through, survive without our intervention. If you succeed, the Empire will reconsider Earth's strategic value. If you fail..." He shrugged. "Then the problem solves itself, and we claim whatever's left." "That's not terms," Cecil said over the comms. "That's extortion." "That's reality," Conquest corrected. "You're caught between forces you don't understand, in a war you didn't know you were fighting. I'm offering you a choice. That's more courtesy than most worlds receive." Superman's eyes began to glow faintly. "And if we refuse both options, tell you to leave, then I report back that Earth is hostile to Imperial interest and you become a priority target for elimination." Conquest's voice never changed, never threatened, just stated facts. "But I don't think you'll do that, because despite your posturing, you're all survivors, and survivors recognize when they're outmatched." He looked at each of them in turn. Superman, Wonder Woman, Mark, the Immortal approaching from the perimeter. "You have until the rifts activate fully. Based on our analysis, that's approximately 48 hours. After that, whatever's on the other side will stop probing and start pushing. When that happens, you'll either have Imperial protection or you'll die fighting something you can't kill." Conquest turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing. To the Kryptonian, I've heard stories about your kind. How you think power and will can substitute for planning. How you believe in absolutes." He smiled that unpleasant smile again. "The entities using these rifts don't care about your will. They don't negotiate. They don't accept surrender. They just consume. If you're planning to punch your way through this problem, you'll learn a valuable lesson about the limits of strength." He looked at Mark. "And to Omni-Man's spawn, your father made a choice that doomed this world. You can either fix his mistake by accepting Imperial protection, or you can prove you're as sentimental as he was and watch everyone you love die for it. Either way, you'll learn what it means to be Viltrumite. We don't lose. We just choose which victories we want to claim." Conquest launched skyward, disappearing into the upper atmosphere in seconds. The silence he left behind was crushing. Finally, Wonder Woman spoke. "We kill him, track him, catch him off guard, eliminate the threat before it becomes an invasion." "We can't," Batman said. "He's broadcasting. Look at the telemetry. He's not just here physically, he's transmitting everything we say and do back to the Empire in real time. If we attack him, we declare war on all of them." "Then what do we do?" Eve asked quietly. Mark looked at Superman, expecting him to have an answer, to declare with absolute certainty what the right choice was. But Superman was staring at the space where Conquest had been. And for the first time since arriving on Earth, he looked uncertain. "We close the rifts," Superman said finally. "We prove we don't need their protection. We handle our own problems. In 48 hours, The immortal's laugh was bitter. It took us all day to stabilize one rift. We've got 5 more, and now we know something's actively trying to open them. Then we work faster. Or, Cecil's voice cut through the argument. Or we consider that conquest might be right. That we're in over our heads. That accepting Imperial protection might be the smart play. No, Mark's voice was sharper than he intended. We don't trade freedom for survival. That's what my father wanted. That's what killed him inside. Your father's not here, Cecil said flatly. And sentiment doesn't stop invasions. I need real options, not idealism. Real options. Mark felt something break inside him. You mean calculate how many people die either way and pick the smaller number? That's Superman's math. That's what everyone keeps telling me is necessary. Fine, let's do the math. He pulled up his own comms display, broadcasting to everyone. Option 1, we surrender to the Empire. They stabilize the rifts, protect us from whatever's coming through. Cost total loss of autonomy. Every human becomes a subject of Viltrumite rule. Based on their history, that means forced labor, genetic selection, gradual extinction of everything that makes us human. Timeline generations. Option 2. We fight the Empire and whatever's coming through the rifts. Cost immediate casualties. Probable extinction. Timeline days to weeks. Option 3. We close the rifts ourselves. Prove we can defend our world without help from conquerors or cosmic threats. Cost unknown. Some of us die trying. Maybe all of us. But we die free. He looked at Superman. You asked what the right choice was. That's my math. I pick option 3. Because if we lose, at least we lose as humans, not as slaves who calculated their way into chains. Superman held his gaze for a long moment. Then slowly, he nodded. Option 3, Superman said. We close the rifts. We hold the line. We show both conquest and whatever's behind those dimensional scars, that Earth isn't weak just because it refuses to become monstrous. He looked around at the assembled group. Cecil, I need every resource you have. Every hero still standing. Every contingency you've been holding in reserve. Batman, we need a plan that doesn't rely on brute force. Eve, Mark, Immortal, you're our closers. We get each rift stabilized. You seal it permanently. And if we fail? Wonder Woman asked. Then Conquest was right, and we were fools for trying. Superman's eyes hardened. But I'd rather be a fool who died fighting than a pragmatist who lived in chains. They returned to GDA headquarters to find Flash awake and sitting up looking marginally less like death. Heard you met Conquest? Flash said weakly. That go as badly as I'm imagining. Worse, Mark said. We've got 48 hours to close 5 rifts or choose between extinction and slavery. Flash nodded slowly. Then I've got something you need to hear. While I was out, I ran calculations. Speed force projections of dimensional stability. And there's a pattern. He pulled up data on a tablet, hands shaking. The rifts aren't just weak points. They're coordinated, triangulated. When they all activate simultaneously, which they will in about 46 hours, they'll create a resonance cascade. Reality won't just tear, it'll shatter. How do we stop it? Batman demanded. You don't stop it from here. The damage is already done. Flash looked at them with exhausted eyes. Someone has to go through one of the rifts, get to the other side, and shut down whatever's coordinating the network from there. That's suicide, Cecil said. That's the only option. Close the rifts from this side, they just reopen. Cut off the head, the body dies. Flash coughed weakly. I tried. Got halfway there, but the speed force couldn't sustain me in that space. I'm human. I need to be tethered to a reality. Someone with durability, with power, that doesn't depend on dimensional physics. He looked at Superman and Mark. One of you has to go through, find the source, destroy it, and probably die doing it. The room went silent. Mark looked at Superman. Superman looked back. And in that moment, they both understood. This was the choice that had been coming since Superman arrived. The choice between survival and sacrifice. Between calculation and conviction. Between proving Conquest right or proving him wrong. I'll go, Mark said. No. Superman's voice cut through the room. I will. And for the first time since meeting him, Mark saw something in Superman's eyes that wasn't certainty. He saw fear, not of dying, but of what it would mean if he was wrong about everything. They had 36 hours left when the argument started. Mark stood in the briefing room, arms crossed, jaw set. Superman faced him across the tactical display, and the space between them felt like a chasm. I'm going, Mark said for the third time. You're not ready, Superman replied. Neither are you. You don't know what's on the other side. None of us do. Exactly. Which is why the person going needs to be strong enough to survive whatever's there without preparation, without warning, without backup. Superman's voice remained level. You're powerful, Mark, but you're young. You hesitate. And in the void between realities, hesitation kills. So does certainty. My father was certain he could conquer Earth. That certainty almost destroyed him. Your father hesitated when it mattered most. That's why he failed. The words hung in the air like a verdict. Cecil intervened before Mark could respond. Both of you are approaching this wrong. We're not sending anyone until we know more about what's on the other side. We don't have time to know more, Batman said. He'd been reviewing Flash's dimensional calculations for the past 6 hours. The resonance cascade will reach critical mass in approximately 34 hours. After that, the rifts won't just open, they'll merge. Turn Earth into the center of a dimensional collapse that could affect adjacent realities. How adjacent? Wonder Woman asked. Unknown. Could be dozens. Could be thousands. Batman pulled up probability matrices. Flash's speed force readings suggest the network extends further than we initially calculated. Whoever's building this isn't targeting Earth specifically. They're targeting the dimensional weak point Earth represents, using it as a hub. Eve leaned forward, studying the data. A hub for what? Transit, resources, invasion routes. Take your pick. Batman highlighted connection points between realities. Think of Earth as a train station. Right now we're seeing people test the platform. When the cascade hits, the trains start arriving, and we won't be able to stop them all. The Immortal slammed his fist on the table. Then we send someone through now, before it gets worse. Stop debating and start acting. Acting without intelligence is suicide, Cecil countered. I'm not sending anyone into the void until we have at least a basic understanding of what they're facing. Then you're condemning Earth to become exactly what Conquest described. A dead world consumed by forces you refused to confront because you wanted perfect information. Superman's eyes tracked to Cecil. You can't contingency your way out of this one director. Eventually someone has to take the risk. And you think it should be you. Cecil's voice was flat. The man who's been here less than a week, who doesn't know this world, doesn't understand its people, doesn't have any stake in its survival beyond proving his methodology works. I have the stake that matters. I'm willing to die for it. So is Mark. So are half the people in this room. Willingness isn't qualification. Then what is? Superman asked quietly. What qualifies someone to jump into the void and maybe never come back? Cecil was quiet for a moment. Then, not having anything left to lose. When you're willing to die for a cause that's heroism, when you're willing to die because living has become unbearable, that's different. That's dangerous. He looked at Superman directly. You came here broken, carrying 5 million deaths and a worldview that says sacrifice is always necessary. Now you want to sacrifice yourself to prove that worldview is correct. That's not heroism. That's suicide with extra steps. Superman's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. Mark felt something shift in his understanding. Cecil wasn't just protecting Mark. He was protecting Superman from himself. We need a volunteer, Batman said, cutting through the tension. Someone durable enough to survive dimensional transit, strong enough to fight whatever's coordinating the network, and expendable enough that losing them doesn't cripple Earth's defenses. No one here is expendable, Eve said sharply. Everyone here is expendable. The Immortal's voice was grim. That's what war means. That's what this is. And if we're going to win, we need to stop pretending otherwise. He stood moving to the center of the room. I'll go. I've lived 3,000 years. Seen civilizations rise and fall, died more times than I can count and come back from it. If anyone's qualified to jump into an interdimensional void and probably not return, it's me. Mark stared at him. You don't know if your regeneration will work there. Flash barely survived and he can move faster than physics. You might just die and stay dead. Then I die. But Earth doesn't. The Immortal looked at each of them in turn. You want someone without attachments? I've outlived mine. You want someone experienced with impossible odds? I've been facing them since before your ancestors invented writing. You want someone who won't hesitate when it matters? He smiled grimly. I stopped hesitating around the fall of Rome. Superman studied him. You'd really do this. Throw yourself into the unknown for a world you've already died protecting. I've done it before. I'll do it again. Only difference this time is I might not come back to complain about it. There has to be another way, Mark said. Some way to close the rifts without sacrificing anyone. There isn't. Flash's voice came from the doorway. He leaned against the frame looking like he might collapse at any moment. I've run every simulation, every probability tree. The dimensional mathematics are absolute. Someone has to go through. Someone has to reach the coordination point and destroy it from the inside. And whoever goes probably isn't coming back. He moved into the room with effort, each step deliberate. But here's what I learned while I was in that void. The Speed Force showed me something before it failed. The coordination point, it's not a machine, it's not a ship, it's organic. Batman's head snapped up. Organic how? Living tissue. Maybe Viltrumite, maybe something else, but it's biological, self-healing, adaptive. You can't just blow it up, you have to kill it. And it's been alive long enough to learn how to not die easily. Mark felt his blood run cold. How long? Flash met his eyes. The energy signature suggests centuries, maybe millennia. Whatever's coordinating this network has been building toward this moment for longer than human civilization has existed. The room went silent. Finally, Cecil spoke. So we're not stopping an invasion. We're stopping something that's been planning this since before we knew invasions were possible. That's one interpretation, Batman said. The other is that this entity has been waiting, preparing, learning from failed attempts across multiple realities. And now it thinks Earth is vulnerable enough to succeed. Thanks to us, Wonder Woman said bitterly. Our dimensional instability, our rifts, we created the opportunity it needed. We didn't create anything. Superman's voice carried an edge. Angstrom Levy created the instability. Mark's war with his alternate selves widened it. We're just the ones left to clean up the consequences. Doesn't matter who created it, the Immortal said. Matters who stops it. And I'm volunteering. I'm going with you. Mark's voice cut through the room. Everyone turned to stare at him. You can't, Cecil said immediately. Why not? You said it yourself, whoever goes needs durability, strength, and experience with impossible situations. Immortal has the experience. I have the durability. Together we've got a better chance than either of us alone. Or you both die, and Earth loses two of its strongest defenders right before the cascade hits, Batman countered. Then what's your solution? Send one person on a suicide mission and hope for the best. At least if there's two of us, one might survive long enough to complete the objective. Superman was quiet, studying Mark with an intensity that felt like X-ray vision. This isn't about survival. This is about your father. You want to prove you're not like him, that you won't abandon Earth when things get hard. Maybe. Or maybe I just don't want to watch another person die for a world they've already bled for while I stay safe. Mark's voice hardened. You keep talking about sacrifice being necessary, about making hard choices. Fine, this is mine. I'm going. Then I'm going too, Superman said. Cecil slammed his hand on the table. Absolutely not. We are not sending 3 of Earth's strongest assets into a potential death trap on a gamble. It's not a gamble if we increase our odds of success, Superman replied. 3 gives us redundancy. If one falls, the others continue. Basic tactical planning. Basic tactical planning doesn't apply to suicide missions. Every mission is a suicide mission until you survive it. Superman's voice remained calm. And I've survived worse than dimensional voids. You've survived Kryptonian threats, human threats. This is neither. This is something you have no experience with. Neither does Mark. Neither does the Immortal. We're all going in blind. Superman looked at each of them. But blind together is better than blind alone. And if we fail, at least, we fail having given Earth every possible chance. Batman had been silent through the exchange, reviewing calculations on his tablet. Now he looked up. There's a problem with sending 3. The rift can't sustain multiple simultaneous transits. The dimensional stress would collapse it prematurely. You'd be trapped on the other side, even if you succeeded. Then we go sequentially, the Immortal said. 30-second intervals. First, one clears the immediate area. Second, provides backup. Third serves as fail-safe. That leaves whoever goes first exposed for at least a minute, Wonder Woman pointed out. Against an entity that's been alive for centuries and can adapt to threats. That's not tactical insertion. That's feeding yourselves one at a time. So what's your alternative? Mark demanded. Wonder Woman was quiet for a moment. Then, I go first. I'm expendable relative to your power levels, but I'm combat trained in ways none of you are. I clear the landing zone, establish a defensive perimeter. By the time the second person arrives, I've created a secure foothold. No, Superman said immediately. It's logical. It's suicide. Everything about this is suicide. At least my version has tactical merit. They argued for another hour. Plans proposed and discarded. Volunteers nominated and rejected. Cecil running casualty projections that all looked equally grim. Finally, Batman called a halt. We're approaching this wrong. We're focused on who goes, not on how they survive once they're there. Flash, you said the Speed Force couldn't sustain you in that void. What did you mean? Flash slumped into a chair. The void isn't empty. It's not vacuum or negative space. It's absence of reality. No physics, no constants. Things we take for granted, causality, linear time, even basic molecular bonds, they don't exist there. The Speed Force anchors me to reality. Cut that anchor and I started dissolving. Not dying. Dissolving. Becoming part of the void. Eve's face went pale. So whoever goes through needs to maintain their own reality field. Keep their atomic structure stable through sheer will. Or through power that doesn't depend on physics. Flash looked at Superman and Mark. Your powers are biological, cellular, built into your structure. You don't need external reality to function. You are reality in a sense. That's why you might survive where I couldn't. Might, Cecil emphasized. Not will. Might. Might is better than nothing, the immortal said. And standing here debating isn't improving our odds. We've got, he checked the display, 32 hours. I suggest we stop talking and start preparing. Cecil finally nodded. Agreed. Here's what we're doing. The immortal goes first. 30 seconds later, Mark. 30 seconds after that, Superman. Each of you gets 5 minutes to assess and adapt before the next arrival. If you're not making progress within 15 minutes total, I'm pulling you back. You can't pull anyone back, Batman said quietly. The rift only opens one way. Return transit requires the coordination point to be destroyed. That was the whole point. Cecil's expression didn't change, but Mark saw something flicker in his eyes. Realization, horror, acceptance. Then they have until the cascade hits, Cecil said finally. 32 hours to find the coordination point and destroy it. After that, either they've succeeded and can return, or he didn't finish. He didn't need to. They spent the next 20 hours preparing. Eve worked with GDA scientists to design temporary reality anchors devices that might help stabilize molecular structure in the void. Batman created detailed probability maps based on Flash's readings, trying to predict where the coordination point might be located. Wonder Woman drilled combat scenarios with the immortal preparing him for combat in an environment where physics might not apply. And Mark trained with Superman. They flew to the upper atmosphere where the air was thin and the curve of Earth visible below, far enough from civilians that their power wouldn't endanger anyone. Close enough to get back quickly when the time came. "Show me what you've got," Superman said. Mark didn't waste time talking. He launched himself at Superman with everything he had. Sonic boom in his wake, air temperature spiking from friction, the kind of attack that would crater a city block. Superman caught his fist. Not easily. Mark felt the impact ripple through Superman's arm, saw his eyes widen slightly at the force. But caught it nonetheless. "Good," Superman said. "But not enough." Whatever's on the other side has been preparing for centuries. It won't let you land a clean hit. He twisted, redirecting Mark's momentum into a throw that sent him tumbling through the stratosphere. Mark corrected, came back around, tried a different approach. Feinted left, struck right. Superman blocked. Tried heat vision equivalents. Mark didn't have those, but his father had taught him how to turn momentum into focused impact. Superman deflected. They fought for an hour, not trying to hurt each other, trying to prepare, testing limits, finding weaknesses. Finally, they broke apart, hovering a mile above the Pacific Ocean. "You're strong," Superman said. "Possibly stronger than me, given time to develop. But you're predictable. You fight like someone who still believes in fair combat. Like there are rules. Aren't there? Not where we're going. In the void, there's no such thing as fair. No such thing as honor. Just survival and extinction." Superman's expression was difficult to read. Your father understood that. It's why he lasted as long as he did. My father lost. He chose humanity over efficiency, and it saved him. Did it? Or did it just delay his death? Superman looked down at Earth, at the blue marble spinning beneath them. I've seen that choice made before. Watched heroes pick honor over necessity. It's beautiful, noble, and it gets people killed. Then why are you going? Mark asked. If you think sacrifice is pointless, why volunteer for a suicide mission? Superman was quiet for a long moment. Because I've spent 5 years trying to save people through control, through order, through making the hard choices they wouldn't make themselves. And it worked. My world is stable. Crime is minimal. People are safe. He looked at Mark, but they're not free. They're not happy. They're just safe. And I look at them and wonder if I saved them or just made them prisoners. So this is penance. This is clarity, a chance to save a world without controlling it. To prove that sacrifice can mean something other than imposing my will on others. Superman's eyes met his. If I die in that void, I die doing something purely good. No calculations, no acceptable losses. Just stepping into darkness so others can stay in the light. Mark felt something shift in his understanding of Superman. Not trust, not even agreement, just recognition of shared pain. My father said something similar, Mark said quietly, before he left. That sometimes the brave thing isn't fighting. It's walking away before you destroy what you love. Your father was wrong. Walking away isn't brave, it's just retreat with better marketing. Superman's voice hardened. But stepping forward into certain death to protect people who'll never know you saved them, that's the only kind of bravery that matters. They returned to find Flash collapsed again, his metabolism finally giving out from the strain. The doctors gave him 72 hours to live, unless his cells stabilized. They had 31 hours until the cascade. He wouldn't make it. Cecil pulled Mark aside. I need you to understand something. If you go through that rift and don't come back, if you die in that void, I'll have to tell people you were killed in action, that you fell defending Earth. I won't tell them you volunteered. Won't tell them you had a choice. Why not? Because if you die, a volunteer people will remember you as brave. If you die because I sent you, they'll blame me. And I need them to blame me. Need them to remember that I'm the one who makes these choices so they don't have to. Cecil's expression was granite. Heroes die clean. Directors die guilty. That's the job. Mark looked at him, at this man who carried the weight of impossible decisions and never asked for recognition, who planned for the worst and accepted the blame when the worst happened. "You think we're going to die," Mark said. "I think you have a 43% chance of success based on Batman's calculations, which means a 57% chance of extinction-level failure." Cecil pulled up the numbers. "I'm sending you anyway, not because I think you'll win, but because doing nothing guarantees we lose. And I'd rather die trying than live knowing I didn't." That's Superman's math. No. Superman's math says sacrifice is noble. My math says sacrifice is mandatory. Cecil looked away. The difference matters. To me, at least. 8 hours before transit, they gathered at the Detroit Rift. The one Mark had talked to, the one that had gone dormant when he'd shown it Earth's vulnerabilities. Now it pulsed again, stronger than before, ready to receive them. The Immortal checked his gear. Modified armor that might survive dimensional stress, weapons that might function in the void, reality anchors that might keep him solid long enough to fight. Mark wore his standard suit, nothing more. If his biology failed him in the void, no armor would help. Superman had removed his cape entirely, torn away the burned remnants, and stood in just the scorched suit beneath, ready to step into darkness as he was. Wonder Woman stood with them, forbidden by Cecil from going, but present nonetheless. "Come back," she told Superman. "I'll try." "That's not good enough. It's all I have." Eve hugged Mark. "If you die in there, I'm going to be so angry at you." "I'll try not to." Also not good enough. Also all I have. Batman pulled Superman aside, spoke quietly enough that Mark couldn't hear. Superman nodded, shook his hand, turned back to the rift. Cecil gave them the final briefing. 15 minutes. That's your window. Find the coordination point, destroy it, get clear. After that, the cascade begins, whether you're ready or not. "And if we can't find it?" the Immortal asked. "Then you've got 14 minutes and 59 seconds to figure out why." The Immortal smiled grimly. "I've fought in worse odds." "No, you haven't," Cecil said flatly. "No one has. This is unprecedented, unpredictable, unsurvivable by any conventional metric. You're walking into mathematical impossibility and hoping willpower matters more than physics." He looked at each of them. "So don't die, because I don't have contingencies for this level of failure." The Immortal stepped to the rift's edge, took a breath, jumped. Reality swallowed him whole. 30 seconds passed. Mark moved to the edge, looked back at Earth one more time. At the people counting on him. At the world his father had tried to conquer and he'd sworn to protect. "See you on the other side," he said to Superman. Then jumped. The void took him. 30 seconds later, Superman stood at the edge, alone. Cecil's voice in his earpiece giving final confirmations, Batman's calculations scrolling across his display, Wonder Woman's hand on his shoulder for one brief moment. Then nothing but him and the abyss. He thought about Metropolis, about 5 million dead, about the choice to become regime, about the cost of certainty. Then he thought about Mark's words, about proving he could save without controlling, about dying for something instead of living with the weight of everything. Superman stepped forward, into the void, into uncertainty, into the only kind of bravery that mattered anymore. And reality closed behind him like a wound. The void was not empty. Mark had expected darkness, silence, the absence of everything. Instead, he found himself in a space that hurt to perceive. Not physically, his Viltrumite durability held, but conceptually. His brain kept trying to impose structure on what he was seeing and failing. Directions that weren't directions, colors that existed outside the visible spectrum. Time moving in ways that made his stomach turn. He'd been falling for what felt like hours or seconds. Both. Neither. The void didn't care about human measurements. Then, he hit something solid. Not ground. There was no ground. But resistance. A surface that existed because something willed it to exist. Mark pulled himself up, or thought he did. Orientation was meaningless here, and saw the immortal 20 feet away. Or 20 miles. Distance worked differently. The immortal was fighting. The entity he fought was Viltrumite in shape, but wrong in every other way. Humanoid, muscular, but its skin rippled with patterns that shouldn't exist. Its eyes were too many and too knowing. When it moved, it left after images that persisted, like reality couldn't quite keep up with where it had been. Mark, the immortal's voice, came from everywhere and nowhere. It's adaptive. Everything I do, it learns. Mark launched himself at the entity. His fist connected with its jaw, and the impact felt real. Solid. The entity staggered back, then smiled. Viltrumite, it said. Its voice was layers of sound harmonics that made Mark's bones ache. Young, strong, predictable. It moved faster than Mark could track. One moment there, the next behind him. Hands on his shoulders, pressure building. You fight like your father. Brave, stupid, doomed. Mark twisted, broke the grip, swung around with enough force to shatter steel. The entity caught his fist. Didn't just block it, absorbed the momentum learned from it, redirected it back, doubled. Mark flew through the void, tumbling through space that had no fixed points. It's learning from us, the immortal shouted, pressing the attack, his sword glowing faintly with the reality anchor's energy carved through where the entity had been. But it was already somewhere else. Then we stopped being predictable, Mark said. He charged again, but this time fainted. Pulled his punch at the last second, shifted angles, struck from below. The entity moved to counter where he'd been going, not where he ended up. Mark's fist connected with its ribs. Something cracked. The entity stumbled. Looked at him with those too many eyes. Clever, it said. Learning. Like father, unlike father. Interesting. Then Superman arrived. The impact of his entry into the void was like a bomb going off. Reality rippled outward from where he materialized, and for a brief moment, Mark saw the entity's true form, not humanoid at all. A mass of living tissue neural networks, biological machinery that had learned to present itself as something comprehensible. And it was enormous. What they'd been fighting was just a fragment. A probe. The real entity was everywhere around them, woven through the void like a nervous system through a body. Superman took in the situation instantly. Saw Mark in the immortal. Saw the entity's fragment. Saw the vast biological network stretching away into infinity. That's the coordination point, Superman said. All of it. The entity's fragment smiled with too many mouths. Kryptonian, regime, murderer of millions. You think you can kill me? I am already dead. Already alive, already everything between. I have been growing for 12,000 of your years. Learning, adapting, consuming realities and incorporating their physics into my structure. It gestured at the void around them. This is not empty space. This is me. You are inside me. Fighting me is fighting yourself. Every move you make teaches me. Every breath you take feeds me. You cannot win. You can only become. Mark felt his blood run cold. Become what? Part of the network. Part of the consumption. Your Earth will be the 700th reality I have processed, analyzed, integrated, and you will watch it happen from inside me, aware but unable to act, forever. The immortal laughed. It was a bitter, broken sound. I've been tortured by experts for 3,000 years. You think eternity scares me? You have not experienced my kind of eternity. When I consume Earth, I will consume its timeline. Past, present, future. Everyone you ever loved will have always been inside me. Your memories will be mine. Your pain will be mine. Your existence will be retroactively erased and simultaneously preserved in a state of perpetual suffering. That's not possible, Mark said. In your reality, no. In mine, it is inevitable. The entity's fragment moved closer. But I am not cruel. I offer you choice. Submit. Join me willingly. Become nodes in my network. Help me process your reality. In exchange, I will let you choose which moments to preserve, which people to remember. You cannot save Earth, but you can decide what version of its ending I keep forever. Superman's eyes began to glow red. We're not joining anything. Then you will be incorporated without consent. The result is identical. Only the process differs. The process matters, Mark said. That's what you don't understand. We're not just fighting for the outcome. We're fighting for the right to choose how we fail. The entity tilted its head, or what passed for a head in this space. Philosophy, how human, how useless. Then it attacked, not with force, with reality itself. The void around them shifted, twisted, became hostile. Mark felt his molecular bonds begin to strain. The reality anchor on his chest flared, fighting to keep him solid. But it was losing. He was starting to dissolve at the edges. The immortal was worse. His regeneration worked by dying and returning. In the void, death didn't work right. He was caught in a loop, his body trying to heal damage that kept recursing, dying and reviving, and dying in the space between moments. Superman held firm longer. His Kryptonian biology was more resilient, his cellular structure more stable. But Mark could see the strain, the edges of Superman's form beginning to blur. You cannot sustain yourselves, the entity said. Your reality anchors are temporary. Borrowed physics from a world that doesn't exist here. When they fail 30 of your seconds remaining, you will dissolve. Become part of me. Feed me your strength. Mark looked at the immortal trapped in his death loop, at Superman fighting to stay solid, at the vast biological network stretching through the void, ancient and patient and impossibly vast. They couldn't win. Not like this. Not by fighting. You said you've been learning for 12,000 years, Mark said. The entity paused. Yes. Learning what? Everything. Every reality I consume teaches me new physics, new possibilities, new ways to exist. I am not a conqueror. I'm a student. I learn by becoming. Then, you've never learned about humans. Mark felt his reality anchor failing. 20 seconds. About what we do when we can't win. You die. I have seen it 700 times. No. Mark looked at Superman, at the man who'd spent 5 years trying to save a world through control, who'd come here to prove sacrifice could mean something other than imposing his will. We choose what we die for. He ripped the reality anchor off his chest. The effect was immediate. His body began to dissolve faster, molecular bonds breaking Viltrumite's cellular structure starting to come apart. But in that dissolution, something else happened. The entity screamed. Not with sound, with distortion. Mark's dissolving biology was introducing chaos into its perfectly ordered system. Random mutations, unpredictable interactions. His Viltrumite DNA, designed to conquer and adapt, was fighting at a level below consciousness. What are you doing? The entity's fragment retreated. Stop. You are contaminating my structure. That's the point, Mark said. His voice was fading, but he smiled. You wanted to incorporate Earth, fine. Here's what Earth is. Chaos, mutation, refusal to be digested cleanly. My father tried to conquer us, and we broke him. You try to consume us, and we'll poison you. The immortal understood immediately. He ripped off his own anchor. His body, caught in its death loop, began pumping out failed resurrection attempts, corrupted genetic data, contradictory healing factors, 3,000 years of accumulated biological damage, all at once. The entity recoiled further. No, you will die. Dissolution is irreversible. We know, the immortal said. His voice was already distant. But you'll spend the next 12,000 years trying to digest us. And every time you try to incorporate our data, you'll get Earth's greatest gift, the refusal to be what you want us to be. Superman watched them dissolve. Watched them sacrifice themselves not to destroy the entity, but to make themselves indigestible, to turn their deaths into poison. And he understood what they needed him to do. You're the student, Superman said to the entity. I'm the lesson. He didn't remove his anchor. Instead, he flew, or the void equivalent, toward the nearest node of the entity's network. The fragment tried to stop him, but it was too busy trying to contain the chaos Mark and the immortal were introducing. Superman reached the node. It was a mass of neural tissue processing data from thousands of realities. Learning, adapting, growing. He placed his hand on it. You said you learned by becoming, Superman said. Then learn this. In my reality, I tried to save everyone through control. Through making the choices they couldn't make. Through sacrifice that wasn't mine to give. I became a tyrant, a dictator, a thing people feared more than the threats I protected them from. His eyes glowed red, heat vision building. But I also learned something those 5 million deaths taught me. Something Mark's father learned. Something every dictator eventually understands. The heat vision fired. Not at the node, into it. Pouring energy directly into the neural tissue. You can't save people by consuming them. You can't learn by erasing what they were. You can only become what they refuse to be. The entity screamed again. The heat vision was introducing pure, overwhelming energy into a system designed for subtle patient consumption, flooding its neural networks with data it couldn't process fast enough. I was wrong, the entity shrieked. About learning, about consuming. I thought understanding required incorporation. But you are teaching by refusing. By forcing me to experience rejection. Come please, a shot. Superman didn't stop. He poured everything he had into that node. Every ounce of solar energy, every bit of strength, until his cells started to burn out, until his reality anchor cracked, until he began to dissolve just like Mark and the immortal. But in that dissolution, he smiled, because he could feel it working. The entity's network was collapsing. Not dying, it was too vast to kill, but fragmenting, disconnecting. The nodes were isolating themselves, severing connections to avoid contamination. The coordinated assault on Earth's rifts was falling apart. Mark felt it too. Through his dissolution, through the chaos his biology was causing, he felt the entity retreat, felt the network shrink back from Earth's reality, felt the rifts begin to stabilize. They'd won. They were also dying. Mark couldn't feel his body anymore. Couldn't feel anything except the strange peace of knowing he'd chosen this. Had stepped forward when it mattered. Had proved conquest wrong. Earth wasn't weak because it refused to be monstrous. Earth was strong because it knew how to lose on its own terms. In the void in the spaces between realities, three forms dissolved completely. Became something other than human, other than Kryptonian, other than Viltrumite. Became a lesson written in sacrifice that would echo through the entity's structure for 12,000 more years. The entity learned, and in learning chose to retreat. On Earth, the rifts collapsed simultaneously, all six in perfect synchronization, the dimensional barriers sealed. Reality repaired itself. Cecil watched from the Detroit site monitoring data that showed the cascade had been prevented. The rifts were closed. Earth was safe. Mark Grayson, the Immortal, and Superman were gone. Eve collapsed to her knees. Wonder Woman stood perfectly still, face unreadable. Batman reviewed the data with mechanical precision, looking for any sign they might have survived. There was none. Cecil gave them 30 minutes, then an hour, then 6 hours, holding out hope that maybe somehow they'd find a way back. They didn't. Finally, 24 hours after the rifts closed, Cecil made the call. Prepare memorial protocols. Mark Grayson, the Immortal, and Superman. Killed in action defending Earth from dimensional incursion. Flash, barely alive in the medical bay, heard the report, closed his eyes. They did it. The madmen actually did it. Did what? The nurse asked. Taught something unkillable, that some things are worse than death. Like living knowing you let everyone down. Flash smiled weakly. Clark would have appreciated the irony. 700 miles above Earth, in a debris field that had once been a surveillance satellite, something stirred. A piece of scorched black fabric. Superman's cape burned away before he'd entered the rift. It shouldn't have been there. The physics didn't work. But reality was still settling after the dimensional disruption, and sometimes things that shouldn't be possible found ways to exist anyway. The fabric drifted in solar wind. Below Earth continued. Rescue crews returned to their routines. Cities rebuilt. People mourned 3 more names on a list that had grown too long. Cecil called a meeting. The remaining heroes gathered. Eve still red-eyed. Batman expression unreadable. Wonder Woman standing alone. The remnants of the Guardians. GDA personnel who'd lost friends and colleagues. We survived, Cecil said. 3 people died to buy us that survival. I need you all to understand something. Mark Grayson, the Immortal, and Superman did not sacrifice themselves because sacrifice is noble. They sacrificed themselves because it was necessary, because the alternative was extinction, because sometimes survival requires loss. He looked around the room. But they also taught us something else. That how we survive matters. That refusing to become monsters in the face of extinction is possible. That we can choose our ending even when we can't choose our outcome. Batman stirred. You're making them heroes. I'm making them what they were. People who walked into certain death because it was right, not because it was smart. Cecil's voice was flat. And I'm making sure everyone knows that I sent them. that I made that call. So when history judges this moment, they judge me, not them. Wonder Woman spoke for the first time since Superman's disappearance. He would have hated that, being remembered as someone who followed orders. Then he should have come back to tell me himself. Cecil pulled up new data. But he's gone. They're all gone. And we're still here. So we honor them by continuing, by preparing for the next threat, by proving their deaths bought us something more than just time. He looked at Eve specifically. Can you detect any residual dimensional instability? She closed her eyes, reaching out with her molecular sense. No, the barriers are solid. Stronger than before, actually. Like Earth's reality scarred over the wounds, it'll be harder for anything to break through now. Good. Then we use that time to prepare, to build defenses, to make sure the next time something comes for us, we're ready. Cecil stood. Meeting adjourned. Get some rest. Tomorrow we start planning for the future. They filed out slowly, exhausted, traumatized, alive. Batman lingered. You're not telling them everything. Cecil looked at him. No. The entity is still out there, wounded but not dead. It will try again. Maybe not here, maybe not for years, but it learned from this. Next time it will be prepared. I know. And Conquest is still watching, waiting to see if we can hold what we've won. If we show weakness, the Empire will move. I know that too. Batman was quiet for a moment. Clark was wrong about a lot of things, but he was right about one. Sometimes the only choice is the hard one. He died proving that. Did he, or did he die proving the opposite, that hard choices don't have to be cruel ones, that you can sacrifice without forcing others to bear the cost? Batman moved toward the door. I'm going back to my reality, if I can. The rifts are closed, but there might be enough residual energy for one more transit. And if not, then I stay here. Help you prepare for what's coming. That's what Clark would do. He paused at the door. He saved my world by becoming something terrible. And he saved yours by refusing to be that same thing. I think he finally understood which kind of saving mattered more. Batman left. Cecil stood alone in the briefing room, looking at casualty reports. 3 more names, 3 more families destroyed, 3 more funerals to authorize. He pulled up the final image from the rift before it closed. Mark's face smiling as he dissolved. Peaceful. Certain. Cecil had seen that expression before. On soldiers who'd made their peace with death. On people who'd chosen their ending. He'd never understood it. Survival mattered. Outcomes mattered. The math mattered. But standing there looking at that smile, he wondered if maybe he'd been wrong. If maybe there was a kind of math he'd never learned. One where how you lost mattered more than whether you won. He closed the file, got back to work, because that's what he did. In the void between realities, something lingered. Not alive, not dead, not quite anything anymore. 3 forms dissolved beyond recognition, woven into the structure of the entity they'd poisoned, teaching it, changing it, refusing to be digested. The entity had retreated, would take decades to recover, centuries to attempt another incursion. But it had learned that some realities fought back in ways that couldn't be predicted, that some species would rather poison themselves than be consumed cleanly, learned that Earth was expensive, and in learning decided to look elsewhere, to find realities that wouldn't fight with such beautiful, terrible determination. The three forms didn't know this. Couldn't know. They were beyond knowledge, beyond sensation, beyond anything that could be called consciousness. But if they could have known, they might have smiled, because they'd won by losing. And sometimes that was the only victory that mattered. 6 weeks later, a probe from a Viltrumite scout ship detected unusual readings near Earth. Dimensional scars, energy signatures suggesting massive reality disruption recently resolved. The probe's data was transmitted back to command. Conquest received the report, read it carefully, made notes. Earth survived, he said to his second, against something that should have consumed them, using tactics that resulted in 0 surviving witnesses who could explain how. Should we investigate? Conquest was quiet for a long moment. Then, no. Earth has proven itself too expensive for immediate action. Mark it as low priority. We'll return in a generation, after they've forgotten what they paid for survival, after they've grown comfortable again. He closed the report. That's when they'll be ready to accept Imperial protection, when fear of the next threat outweighs memory of this one. The scout ship adjusted course, left Earth's solar system, returned to Viltrumite space, and Earth continued, rebuilding, preparing, remembering. 3 names on a memorial that would stand for centuries. Mark Grayson, the immortal, Superman. They had walked into darkness so others could remain in light. And in the end, that was enough. The story places the world of Invincible into a hypothetical crisis. What would happen if a powerful foreign force suddenly appeared in this reality? And how would the world respond? By a twist of fate that force is injustice, a team of superhumans from another Earth. Despite deep internal fractures and conflicting ideals, they share one common objective: the protection of the planet against existential threats. Throughout the story, not all ideological conflicts are fully resolved. Old wounds remain and disagreements persist. But when extinction becomes a real possibility, these heroes learn to set everything else aside and focus on what truly matters. The story ultimately culminates in a defining act of classic heroism. Superheroes from both worlds choose sacrifice over domination, stepping into the unknown to save a planet that is not entirely their own. This is a story about an Earth no longer saved by sheer power, but by choice and by the price paid when one refuses to become a monster in order to survive.
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and be sure to turn on notification so you won't miss our future video. Thank you for watching, and we will see you next time.